Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto become the Death Dealer. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Sitting in a bar somewhere in Swallow Island was a young man in his early 20s. He has faint shadows right under his yellow eyes, and his mouth is usually seen in a smile. He has dark hair, a majority of which is obscured, save for his sideburns and small goatee by the northern-style fur hat that he wears, which is white and has spots on the bottom and along the rim. The man has many tribal-style tattoos and has the letter tattooed on each of his fingers. He's the captain of the Heart Pirates Trafalgar Law. Taking a sip of his drink, he thinks to himself, where should I check for my next crew member? In terms of numbers, I'm behind a large majority of pirates. I have Beppo as my navigator and a few others, but I'm still missing a first mate. Putting the drink back on the stool, he hears someone speak from one of the tables behind him. Yeah, he got another one. This guy's been taking pirates out left and right, he hears someone say. A fellow pirate, if you were to guess. He couldn't sense anything special about him though, just a regular pirate. From what I've heard, he only targets people with bounties higher than 100 million. Another one pitched in. That reminded him of the wanted posters he'd seen snatched earlier in the day. Pulling them out, he sees Strafut Luffy and Pirate Hunter Rorano Azoro, both with bounties over 100 million. Quite a few have bounties that meet this guy's criteria. Even me at 200 million. He thinks while putting the posters away. Still, for this guy to be taking out pirates like that must mean he's strong. This was interesting. He stood up and walked over to their table where they were discussing it. This bounty hunter you guys are talking about, where is he? They look at him strangely for a second, probably trying to figure out who he was before shrugging. He's here in North Blue. His last target was at Minion Island about a day ago, one of the guys replied. Last I heard, he's taken down 17 upcoming pirates so far, all with bounties between 100–200 million. The crazy thing is most of them were devil fruit users, said another one of the guys. This guy is taking down devil fruit users by the bunch, huh? He thought to himself before asking another question. Does he have a name? He noticed they only referred to him as a bounty hunter. It was the guy who first answered who spoke. His real name is unknown, but everyone who's heard of him call him the Death Dealer. Hearing that name must have gotten someone's attention because a man at the end of the bar where Law had been sitting spoke next. The Death Dealer, I've heard of him. Word is he's got a perfect record in his hunts. Not one of his targets has managed to escape him, he says before paying his tab and leaving. Muttering a quick thanks to the guys at the table, he went back to his original spot in the bar. He sat forward and rested his elbows on the wood. The Death Dealer, huh? This is worth checking out, he thinks before leaving some berry on the counter and leaving. He walked for 10 minutes before arriving at the Heart Pirates ship, Polar Tang. Walking inside, he was greeted with 3 people. The first is Beppo, a white bear minkman. He wears an orange jumpsuit that bears the Heart Pirates Jolly Roger. He also wears small brown boots and has sharp teeth and claws. He's the crew's navigator. Next is an average-sized lean man with red hair that reaches his shoulders. Like the other Heart Pirates, he wears a beige overall, with their Jolly Roger displayed on the back and the chest pocket, as well as brown boots. He wears a blue hat with a red brim and is always seen wearing sunglasses. There is also a tattoo located on his forearms. This is Shachi. Finally, another man dressed in the same manner as Shachi, though his hat reads Penguin on it. This is Penguin. Shachi, Penguin, he said, getting their attention. Go gather the rest of the crew, we'll be leaving soon. They nodded before heading out. The captain turned his attention to his navigator and spoke. Beppo, direct us to Minion Island when they get back. Beppo nodded and prepared the ship but still asked. You seem to be in a rush, Captain. What's going on? Law placed his nodashi along the wall and laid back. I've heard something interesting recently. This may be what I've been looking for, he answered and closed his eyes. Half an hour later they were setting sail. 2 days later. On Minion Island, in a relatively empty part of the island, there were 2 inhabitants. Though only one was of importance as the other was now lifeless. He was an average-sized young man of about 22. He had spiky blonde hair and wore all black except for his dark blue jacket he had on. Black pants along with a simple black undershirt. On his waist was a dark blue sheath for a katana. That's another one down, the young man says as he pulls the blade out of the mont's back. The blade itself is a regular curved blade. The crossguard of the sword was in a horizontal Z shape and the hilt was also dark blue in a diamond pattern. Sheathing the blade, he pulls out a wanted poster and draws an X through the image. Rolling it up, he puts it away before bending down to pick up the now dead pirate. "This is getting too easy," he said, throwing him over his shoulder and walking away. It was only a 2-mile walk before he made it into town. Looking around the snowy city, he finally found the nearest marine bounty station. As he approached the building, he noticed a man leaning up against the side of the building. He was in jeans and a black jacket with his hood up. He kept his eye on him for another second before continuing with his day. It was only 10 minutes later when he emerged, the body now belonging to the Marines. He noticed the man was still there but hadn't moved an inch from where he had been. Not paying it any mind, he counted his money. He continued doing so as he walking in the same direction where he had killed the last target. 114 million. Pretty good. Still getting kind of bored though, he grumbled to himself. He continued to walk for another few minutes before suddenly stopping. In the blink of an eye he turned around and had swung his katana in the air. The house nearest to him began to fall apart and in the dust he saw a shape get out of the way. I knew it, he thought. Someone had been following him since he left the bounty station, and he had a feeling he knew who it was. As soon as the dust cleared up, he found out he was right. It was the same guy hanging out outside of the bounty station. "Yo," the man said, most of his face still obscured by the hood. The only thing he could make out was a goatee. "Are you the one they call the death dealer?" the man questioned. "Depends. Who wants to know?" the young man replied. He watched as the guy pulled his hood down, revealing a young man, maybe a year or two older than him, with messy black hair. "Trafalgar Law, aka the Surgeon of Death. Your head's worth 200 million berry, you know," the death dealer said before adding, "People usually hope I don't meet them. Yet here you are coming straight to me. Why?" he asked as he laid a hand on his katana. "I heard about you taking out pirates with high bounties and that got my attention. Then I hear you mumbling about starting to get bored and thought this is perfect as I have a proposition for you," Law said. He watched the death dealer frown. He clearly wasn't expecting this. "What is it?" he asked slowly. He was interested in what Law had to say but was still had his hand on his blade. "I want to find the One Piece. But to do that, I'll need to have a strong crew to get there," he said, trailing off. The man smirked as he knew where this was going. "So you want me to join you? Thanks, but I'll pass. I have no interest in the One Piece. I want to build my own fortune, not take someone else's. I want to meet beautiful women, and finally I want to fight the strongest pirates in the world and have them kneel to me," he says as he turns around. "If you leave now I won't kill you just yet," he says before beginning to walk away. Law stood in place and called out once more. "Have you heard of Don Quixote da Flamingo?" he asked calmly. Having heard the Mont's goal made it easier. He's one of the people I plan to face along the way. No doubt the Yonko will eventually be in the way as well. You help me find the One Piece as my first mate, and in return you get the best fights of your life. I'm sure you have connections so you can still cash in on the bounties of the people we face along the way," Law said. "Sounds good, doesn't it?" he asked rhetorically. He watched with a smirk as the blonde mulled over his words. "It does sound pretty good," thought the blonde. Daffy, Whitebeard, Shanks, Kaido, Big Mom, the Marine Admirals. He went through in his head. He allowed a small smirk to grace his face before stoning it and turning back to Law. He nodded his head back in the direction of the town. "Follow me," he said before walking off. The two walked into a full bar and sat along the back at an empty table. The blonde motioned the bartender to get him a drink before nodding to Law to get him one as well. Once their drinks arrived, he sat back and took a sip. "So," he began, "how many people you got in your crew, not counting yourself?" "At the moment I have about 7. Law answers, hoping it won't deter the man. "Any notable characters?" the blonde asked. "Probably not. If I did, there's a chance they'd already be on your list," Law answered. That got a chuckle out of the bounty hunter. "So what's your plan?" he followed up. "Head to Sabodi Archipelago to restock on supplies. After that, pick up a couple more members and head to the New World," Law told him. He nodded. It was a good idea. Only fools would go into the New World unprepared. He's got a decent plan and it has been getting boring lately. The battles I could have along the way and the bounties of the strongest pirates has a certain appeal to me. If we find the One Piece and I beat the strongest, my name will go down in history, he thought to himself. Alright Law, you've got yourself a first mate, he said, extending his hand. Law took it. Good. Come on, let's go, he said as they leave the bar. They walk to the docks where the Polar Tang is docked. The blonde whistled at the sight of the big submarine. You know, if anything goes wrong while we're underwater in this thing, you and I are dead, he comments, earning a laugh from his new captain. They enter and are met with the rest of the crew. Beppo, Shachi and Penguin were there as well as some others. The first is a woman with curly dark brown hair and light brown eyes. She is wearing a yellow and orange hat. Like all the other members of the Heart Pirates, she wears a boiler suit with the crew's Jolly Roger imprinted on the left breast. This is Akaku. Next to her is a tall man with puffy light hair. His eyes do not seem to have irises or pupils. He wears a gray bandana with vertical black stripes on his face, which covers his entire face and goes all the way down to his upper chest. Like most members of the Heart Pirates, he wears a white boiler suit with the Heart Pirates' Jolly Roger on the left breast. This is Uni. Finally is a man of average size with brown hair, although only the bangs can be seen as his head is covered by a long dark blue hood that has a tip at the end. Like most members of the Heart Pirates, he wears a white boiler suit with the crew's Jolly Roger on the left breast. This is Cleone. Yo. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. You guys probably know me as the Death Dealer. Looks like we're crewmates now. Naruto greeted before he turned to Law. So where do I stay on this sub? This way. The captain said, leaving the crew to talk. They looked nervous. Law took him to an empty room with only a bed inside. This will be your room, he told him. Naruto nodded and threw his bag of berry from his bounty on the bed and also threw his blade. Before we take off, let me get some of the stuff I have on this island, Naruto told him before leaving the crew to themselves. They watched him leave through the top and close the metal lid before looking to their captain. Captain, are you insane? Shachi asked. I had heard some stories about this guy but passed them off as just some rumors, and you actually brought him here? He continued on frantically. What if he tries to kill you in your sleep? Asked Penguin. Their concerns are justified. Some of the people here that saw him say that he goes for pirates with high bounties. You're worth 200 million. Beppo tells him. It's fine. Law replied easily. If he wanted me dead, he'd have done it the moment he caught on to me following him. He's interested in fighting strong opponents and knows this is the best way for him to do so, he says. Looking up, he sees they're not entirely convinced, but that was to be expected. Well, if you say so, Penguin said. What is his power anyways? He follows up. I'm not entirely sure. Law replies. He's skilled with a sword, as he was easily able to slice up a house with no problem, but as far as his devil fruit, I don't know, he answered. As he did, he heard the latch open and in came the blonde once more. This time he was carrying an even bigger bag. Noticing the stares, he answered. It's all the bounty money I've collected. I wasn't about to leave without it, he said as he went to put it away. When he came back, Law decided it was time to get to know their newest member. So, what's your devil fruit power? Law asked straight to the point. Naruto smirked. I ate the Yorio no mi, he answered. It wasn't a fruit they were familiar with. It's a paramecia type that allows me to perfectly calculate the absolute lethal dose of anything I consume. The amount that will cause death without fail. He revealed, enjoying the look that came across their face as they realized what he could do. I can then raise or lower that value as I see fit, which will cause a lethal dosage of whatever I want. For example, if I were to fight our captain here and consumed enough of his blood, I could then decrease the lethal dosage in his body, making his own blood fatal to him. Understand? He asked. They nodded, now understanding why he was so strong. Suddenly it made sense why he was referred to as the Death Dealer. That's a terrifying ability, Beppo commented, getting over his shock. He thought his captain had a strong power, but this was something else. Isn't it? Naruto agreed. There's more to it, but that's the basic idea, he told them. Hey, I knew adding you to the crew was a good idea, Law commented. Alright Beppo, let's head to Sabaody, he told the navigator. They submerged and headed out. It was a pretty uneventful trip. Beppo was steering while the others were trying to be discreet about keeping an eye on the first mate. About an hour into the trip, Beppo spoke. "Captain, we have 3 Navy ships directly ahead of us," he said. Law looked up and was going to suggest to just dive deeper, but he had another idea. "Surface. We'll deal with them." Naruto quickly went to get his blade before coming back. Doing as he was told, he took her up and quickly broke the surface. They were directly in front of the ships. Law and Naruto stepped outside and quickly scanned the people. None of them were of any real threat. "So how do you want to deal with them?" Naruto asked, ignoring their orders to surrender. "I want to see what you can do," Law answered, looking back at him. "Hey, all right then," he said before jumping forward onto their ship. As soon as he jumped, they fired their cannonballs. He easily cut the lot of them with his blade, sending them off course. Landing on the poop deck of the center ship, he began playing with the Marines. He quickly cut one across the chest before spin-kicking the one behind him overboard. He jumped to the side to avoid a bullet before rushing the man. He kneed him in the gut before cutting him in the back and dropping him. Looking over, he noticed the Marines aiming at him. Jumping high in the air, he quickly let off 3 slices, and they watched as the ship cut into 3 even pieces before sinking into the ocean. Having successfully taken down 2, he jumped over to the last ship and stood still in the center. The Marines were all looking at him in fear of what he could do, but no one seemed to want to back down. Law had taken this time to hop onto the ship as well to see the action clearly. "You're brave, I'll give you that. Because of that you won't end up in the ocean like your fellow Marines," Naruto said. "Gift bad," he said. Law watched as a black pool-like substance appeared on the floor of the ship. He watches in fascination as the entire crew just fall over. They're alive, but they're out cold. "Damn," he commented as Naruto stopped the technique. "What was that?" he asked. "One of my techniques. I lowered their resistance to nitrogen. Seeing as it's a vital part of air, they passed out due to me lowering their resistance to it," he explained. It was one thing to have it explained, but watching it was something else. Beppo was right. "That is terrifying," he said as they headed back to their ship. "Hey, our crew's strength just went up," he thought happily. Their chances of surviving the new world had just gone up tremendously. The crew had finally made it to Sabodi Archipelago. After the incident with the Navy, they ran into little to no trouble. It took them a week and a half to reach the place, but they made it. In the time it took them to get there, the crew had warmed up to their blonde crewmate. They were still cautious around him, but since their captain trusted him, they would give him a chance. The sudden stop of the sub let them know that they were ready to surface. Beppo took them up, and soon enough they were heading outside. Naruto looked around in amazement at how tall the trees were as well as all the bubbles that surrounded the place. He looked to the nearest tree and read, "Grove 20 feet" in white lettering. Stepping onto the island, the crew began walking. They walked in silence, taking it all in for a few minutes before realizing something. "There's nobody here," Law said as he looked at some of the buildings. They were beat down and looked like they hadn't been used by any residents in a while. They continued walking deeper into the trees before both Naruto and Law stopped, drawing attention from the rest of the crew. They both looked up at the same time. "Hey, you feel that?" Naruto asked his captain. "Yeah." As soon as Law replied, 13 men appeared from atop the tree branches. "Ha ha ha, looks like we got one, boys. Your bounty is mine," one of them yelled as he jumped down, his blade high in the air. The rest following soon after. Law raised his hand, palm facing the ground, and a white circle began spinning before expanding considerably. "Room," he said calmly as a light blue dome quickly appeared around the surrounding area. All 13 bounty hunters were within the dome. Naruto looked down to see a piece of wood next to his foot. He kicked the piece into the air in direction of one of the bounty hunters. The man just tilted his head, letting it sail past him. "Law," Naruto called out. In an instant the blonde disappeared from his spot and was replaced with the wood. He reappeared behind the man and quickly cut the man up into 3 pieces. Normally this is where he would have died, but instead the pieces just began floating about. Law unsheathed his nodashi and made several quick slicing movements before sheathing his weapon. Everyone was now no more than floating body parts in Law's room. "I heard about this technique when I was researching you, but seeing it in person is even more impressive," Naruto comments as he watches Law make circular motions with his hands. The body parts begin connecting with different ones, and some were even sticking to the trees and surrounding items. "Hey, stop, that's my leg," one yelled. "That's my arm, what are you doing?" Another yelled as he watched his leg be attacked to where the head of someone else was supposed to be. The rest of the crew watched with wide eyes as their crewmates handled them like nothing. The hunters didn't even make it to the ground. Law cancelled the technique and was about to keep walking when he saw Naruto walk up to one of the bodies. The blonde noticed a few pieces of brown paper sticking out of the pockets of one of the guys. He quickly snatched them and checked them out. Wanted posters, he thought as he shuffled through them. I don't know if you were their main target, but you're one of them for sure, he commented as he holds up Law's wanted poster. He looks at the rest with a calculating eye. I recognize every single person on this list. Wait, this one's different, he thinks as he looks it over. A map of the archipelago, sweet. He threw the posters away while keeping the map. So groves 1 to 29 are a lawless area, Law says as he reads over the notes on the map. The supplies are going to be in Grove 40 then, he adds. They nod and head on their way. After that first initial attack they were only ambushed one more time and settled it with almost no difficulty on their part. After about 20 minutes of walking they finally arrived at Grove 40 after having passed by the amusement park. There were bright lights and plenty of people going about their day, unlike where they had arrived. Well, we're definitely in the right place, Naruto commented as he looked around. Everything from fishmen to things I haven't seen before are here, he added after seeing a blue-skinned man pass by. We're above Fishman Island, so that's probably why there are some fishmen here, Law told him. Naruto was about to say something else when the sound of his stomach rumbling stopped him. Come to think of it, I haven't had a meal in about 10 hours, Naruto said as he looked around for a place to eat. Beppo and the others murmured in agreement. I could go for some food myself, Law said as he walked forward. Not too far away was a decent-looking restaurant, and if the smell coming from it was any indication, it was rather good. They were seated near the back of the restaurant and were given appetizers. As Naruto was taking in the environment, he noticed 4 people who stood out in the building. The first was an older-looking man surrounded by a few others wearing similar suits to his standing behind him as he ate. He is a short man with a stocky build whose appearance is somewhat similar to that of a mafia boss. He sports an oiled-up and slicked-back hairstyle befitting that of a crime don. His facial features have a very stern look to them, further accentuated by his rather sharp but hooking beak-like nose. He also has 5 o'clock stubble on his upper lip. He wears a black and white pinstriped attire, complete with a green scarf around his neck, with the excess tucked inside the suit. His name is Capone, Gang, Beeg, captain of the fire tank pirates. His head is worth 138 million berry. Diagonal from him was a tall, muscular man with pale skin and bright red hair, resembling flames. His nose has a particular shape, being quite pointed and having little protrusions on both sides. He has dark reddish-purple colored lips and fingernails, red, orange eyes and no eyebrows. His attire consists of black and yellow lizard print pants with a red fringe, motorcycle boots, and a blue sash under a green belt fastened by a large circular buckle with a 4-leaf clover-like pattern in the middle. He also has a slim bandolier, also with minuscule bolts that go diagonally over his right shoulder then ties to his waist. His name is Eustace, Captain Kidd. His head is worth 315 million berry. The next one was a female who was currently sitting atop the table with multiple plates stacking up at a rapid pace. Her outfit consists of a white low-cut tank top that exposes both her midriff and cleavage, along with a pair of orange and black striped buckled shorts with long, thin suspenders. She also wears black high-heeled boots which reach up to her calves, with large laces coming from the openings, and a pair of hot pink and dark red stockings with a yellow sun-like motif on them. The hat she wears is a green fuchsia with a light green lining. She has an anti-eyebrow below her right eye, bright red lipstick on her lips, and is sometimes seen wearing a brown fur jacket. She has long pink hair and purple eyes. Her name is Jewelry Bonnie, captain of the Bonnie Pirates. Her head is worth 140 million berry. Finally was a man with incredibly long arms, and he had 2 elbow joints on each arm. He wears a set of orange headphones with his name on either side over his ears and hairstyle similar to Jabra's, where the hair on his scalp has been pulled tightly so that his roots resemble lightning patterns. A red Chinese garb with Crew's Jolly Roger at the center of a large flower-like print splayed across the chest area, as well as on his back. He also has a yellow scarf around his waist. His name is Scratchman Apu, captain of the On-Air Pirates. His head is worth 198 million berry. Well, that explains all the bounty hunters here. Law says as he began eating the food that was brought to them. Finishing his bite, he added, "This place is crawling with high bounty pirates. You'd have been in heaven here if you were still just a bounty hunter." The heart pirates weren't the only ones who noticed this either. Eustace ate a piece of meat and spoke to his crew, though he spoke loud enough for mostly everyone to hear him. 3 big names in one place. 10 of us total here with bounties over 100 million, he said, not recognizing who Apu was. "There's supposed to be 18 more, answered Apu. Eustace looked at him for a second before asking, "Who the hell are you?" rudely. Naruto took this opportunity to let himself be known. Scratman Apu, also known as the Sea Roar. He also has a bounty over 100 million, so that would make it 11 on the island, he told Eustace before turning to Apu. Also, the other 18 won't be making it here or to the New World, he informed him. "Yeah?" asked an irritated Eustace. "How would you know? Come to think of it, who the hell are you two? I recognize Law next to you, but I have no idea who you are," he said. At this point he'd gotten the attention of both Capone and Bonnie, the latter of which was still eating. "First mate of the Hard Pirates, Uzumaki Naruto. No bounty," he introduced. Kid, along with a large majority of the pirates in the room, began laughing uncontrollably at this. Law and Naruto both let a small smirk come across their faces. These guys had no idea. Finally, having gotten himself under control, Eustace spoke up again. "No bounty. No wonder I haven't heard of you. You're a nobody," he said while standing up. "I should just kill you now and save you the trouble of getting killed in the New World." Not at all fazed by Kid, Naruto took a sip of his drink and replied, "Perhaps you may know me by my other name." He paused for effect. "Have you ever heard of the Death Dealer?" Anyone who may have still been laughing from earlier immediately shut up. All 4 captains' eyebrows in the room had raised slightly. "Ah, so you have heard of me?" he asked out loud. He turned his attention strictly to Kid and said, "The reason they won't be showing up is because I'm the one that killed them." Appo's eyes were the only ones who were up in disbelief. He'd heard of the man but believed the tales to be an exaggeration. Most bounty hunters were low-level wannabes with the exception of a few like Roronoa Zoro. Now he understood why he didn't have a bounty on his head. Outside the restaurant, both the residents of Sabaody and tourists alike were minding their own business when suddenly the wall exploded. Out of the smoke, Naruto jumped out and stood in the middle of a couple of buildings. Placing his hands in his pockets, he sighed as he really should have seen something like this coming. Capone, Bonnie, and Apu also jumped outside, though they stayed off to the side, interested in what would happen. Law too joined as he brought his food outside and sat atop a wooden crate. It was one thing to watch him fight low-level marines and bounty hunters, but this would be more interesting. "You should really stop before you end up dead, Kid," Naruto warned. "You bastard!" Kid yelled in anger as he glared at the blonde. "One of the pirates you recently killed was an informant of mine. You've managed to set me back quite a bit, and for that you're going to die," he said as he used his devil fruit powers to draw any metal objects towards him. Guns, swords, scrap metal all began gathering at Kid's hand as he raised it up high. Naruto watched as the metal began taking the form of a giant hand that began descending upon him. He easily dodged the first hit, letting it make a big crater in the ground before jumping over a swipe. He continued to jump, duck, and dodge the swipes before having to draw his blade to deflect pieces of sharp scrap metal attacking him. "Should we help him, Captain?" asked Beppo. "Nah, he'll be fine," replied their captain coolly. "Looks like he's not gonna stop. Might as well get my name out there. Showtime," he thought before jumping and letting himself get hit with a hard swipe by the metal fist. He was sent flying face first into a building. It collapsed soon after burying him in rubble. "Ha ha ha ha." Kid laughed as he deactivated his powers, allowing all the metal to drop. "Serves you right." Bonnie took a bite of her pizza and spoke. "Looks like you're gonna need a new first mate, Law. He's probably dead. Looks like those stories about him were just rumors after all." Law says nothing but is watching the rubble through slightly narrowed eyes. "I know that's not enough to take you out. What are you up to?" he thought. He was right as pieces of the building began moving before a hand appeared. Eustace frowned as he saw it and allowed some electricity to gather at his hand, ready to activate his power once more. The blonde stood up, blood dripping down from his forehead. They watch in disgust as he makes a cup with his hand under his chin and lets the blood collect before drinking it. "What the fuck?" asked Kid, saying what everyone was thinking. "Everyone minus Law and the hard pirates, that is. Allows me to perfectly calculate the absolute lethal dose of anything I consume. The amount that will cause death without fail," he recalled the blonde saying when he joined. "Did you really think that would be enough to kill me, Kid?" Naruto asked rhetorically. "Well, it doesn't matter. Just know your death is imminent from this point on," he said. "I've lowered your body's lethal dose tolerance in your blood system," he explained. Most of the spectators were wondering what he was talking about since they hadn't seen him do anything. "What are you talking about?" Kid asked. "It's a special ability of my devil fruit. All you need to know is that the blood circulating through your veins is bringing you closer and closer to death," the blonde said. Kid grit his teeth as he felt his body start becoming weaker. He wasn't stupid. He knew the blonde wasn't lying since he was feeling the effects. "If my body's tolerance was decreased, then all I have to do is lose a little blood then," he thought as he reached for his dagger. He pulled it out and prepared to stab himself in the gut with it, but was stopped as his opponent spoke up once more. "I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you're just gonna cut yourself and lower your blood. Sorry to say, but it's not that easy," Naruto said before he took a quick look at Kid. "A man of your stature looks to be about 95 kilograms. The approximate ration of blood per kilogram is about 65.7 milliliters of blood per every kilogram of weight. So you have roughly 6 liters of blood in your body," Naruto began. Law, being the medic he is, nodded in agreement. He was inwardly impressed by the blonde's knowledge of the human body. "Though I guess with his power it would be in his best interest," he thought. "If you lose half of that, in this case 3 liters, you'll die of blood loss. On top of that, the lethal dose your body can handle, I've decided, is 2 liters," he said, loving the wide-eyed look of fear on Kid and everyone else's eyes. "I know you're not as stupid as you look, but I'll spell it out for you anyways. Either you'll die of blood loss, or you'll be killed by your own blood circulating through your veins." It was at this point that Kid coughed up a bit of blood and fell down face first. His crew quickly came to his aid. Every pirate who had witnessed the battle watched in both fear and awe. Kid had the highest bounty of them all and was by no means weak, and had been beaten like nothing. "So that's why they call him the Death Dealer," Capone said as he took a puff of his cigar. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't the least bit worried about this man. "The Surgeon of Death and the Death Dealer," began Apu. "That's a ridiculously terrifying combination," he said as he wiped his forehead. He hadn't even realized he'd begun sweating. Naruto walked up to the downed form of Kid, ignoring the man's crew. "Don't worry, Kid, you'll live. I just want you to know how easily I could have killed you as I so wished." With that being said, he turned and noticed that the staff had all left the restaurant. "Damn, gotta go eat somewhere else." The crew stood up and began heading for another restaurant. As Law walked by Kid, he spoke, and after all that big talk inside, he trailed off slightly. "This is what happens when you rush into a fight without a plan." Saying his piece, he walked next to Naruto as they left. The people watching all began muttering to themselves about what they had just seen. They watched as Kid got up and glared at both Law and Naruto as they walked away. He made a promise to himself that he'd kill both of them in the new world. "You know you've just made us enemies of the Kid Pirates," Law said with an amused tone. "Yeah, but it's nothing we can't handle. They were already a potential enemy anyways," Naruto replied. So that was another of your devil fruit abilities," Law said, more than asked. "Yeah, it's one of the stronger ones," the blonde replied. "So then encountering an admiral won't be too much of a problem then?" he asked. "No, it'll still be a problem. That ability only works on Paramecia and Zone-type users as well as regular non-devil fruit fighters," he explained. This is what Law was interested in. This power seemed to be too good to not have some limits. Logia users can change their body into an element, changing the nature of their entire body. So while it would work on, say, Aokiji or Akainu, it won't work on someone like Kizaru. Manipulating the dosage of blood is more difficult than any other substance, so it takes longer. I was able to do it to Kid because he was arrogant. An admiral wouldn't give me enough time to do it. Not as I am now anyways. The only one who would let me would probably be Kizaru out of curiosity, but he's the one it won't work on," he told him as they entered another place. "I knew there would have to be some big drawbacks. He'd be unstoppable if he could just do it to anyone. Law thought. Wait, he said as he put a hand up. Look. They looked out the window and saw Roronoa Zoro walking directly into a celestial dragon's path. Oh, this is gonna be good, Naruto said as he eagerly watched. The crew watched as Zoro stopped in front of the celestial dragon, who had an annoyed look on his face. Naruto noticed that the fat man was standing next to a chained man who looked half dead already and had 2 women chained at the neck. He scowled. They like to paint us as the bad guys, but the Marines allow shit like this to happen. Hypocrites, he says angrily. Law raised an eyebrow. You got a personal problem with the celestial dragons? He asked curiously. Yeah, I hate them. Look at them. He motions to the Mon's head, inside their little bubble, because they can't be bothered to breathe our air. It's too bad they can't be touched. Beppo commented. The moment someone defies them, the Navy will have an admiral here in a heartbeat, he said. Yay, we can't touch them, Naruto said as he noticed the man was eating an ice cream cone. Back outside, Zoro asked if he needed directions. The man was shocked and quickly raised his golden gun and aimed it at the pirate. Anyone with any observation skills noticed Roronoa's smirk and get ready to strike. He's gonna do it, said Law, an entertained smile slowly creeping onto his face. They watch him dodge the bullets fired and pull his blades out of their sheath. Just as he was going to go for the killing blow, they watched as he was tackled to the ground by Jewelry Bonnie. While everyone was preoccupied watching what was going on outside, Naruto quickly snatched an ice cream cone from a waitress that was nearby, quick enough not to be noticed. Won't get a chance like this again, will we? He whispered to himself. He didn't know that Beppo had heard him. Watched as the fat man turned around to leave while continuing eating his dessert. The moment the man finished the cone, Naruto quickly downed the ice cream and looked at the retreating dragon with an evil look on his face. Did you just? Beppo asked and trailed off. I'm going to lower it slowly throughout the day. I guarantee this much though, by the end of today the world will have 1 less asshole, he says, chuckling as they continue eating. After their meal they left the building and the crew discussed what supplies needed to be obtained. I'm gonna go check out a pharmacy I saw a while back, Law said. Beppo, Shachi, and Penguin would be joining him. Well, I'm gonna head to Sabodi Park and see what I can do, Naruto said. Alright then, we'll meet back here in an hour and a half, Law told them, and they headed in their own directions. It didn't take him too long to reach the park, and the first thing that stood out to him was a certain man. He was wearing a red vest with a brown straw hat. Monkey D. Luffy, 300 million berry bounty just barely below kid, he said to himself. Had he still been a bounty hunter he would have attacked then and there. He shrugged and continued with his business. Unless Law wanted him dead he'd leave. Hey, I never thought I'd be taking orders from someone. Good thing I'm not prideful, he thought to himself before looking around. He didn't have to look for long as he noticed an attractive older woman sitting by herself on a bench. He smiled brightly. It must be my lucky day, he thought as he approached her. His luck with women was still good, as an hour later the two found themselves sharing a drink as he listened to her tell him about herself. He was listening her tell him about how flexible she was when he heard something rather interesting. It was thanks to his time hunting that he was able to pick up the conversation. We need to head to the human auction house. I heard they're selling a giant and a mermaid, one of the guys whispered. No way, what time? The other asked. It starts at 4 o'clock. Naruto narrowed his eyes. This place sold people and fishmen like it was a regular occurrence. Like it was okay. That's fascinating, Naruto told the woman. Well, sorry to cut this short, sweetheart, but I have to go. If I'm around again soon I'll look you up, he told her before he headed back to their meet-up spot. A shame. This one looked like she was one of the wild ones. When he made it back to the meet-up spot he noticed that the crew had already gathered. Hope they hadn't been waiting long. They noticed him and Law nodded to him in a specific direction and began walking. We're going to Grove 1, he said as he caught up to them. I heard about an auction and wanted to check it out, he explained. I was just about to tell you the same thing. Beppo noticed that Naruto was the only one of them who didn't have anything on him and asked him about it. Oh, I spent my time with this gorgeous woman I met at the park, he answered happily. The crew sweat dropped. Of all the things he could have been doing, he decided to spend his time hitting on women. Anyways, I overheard some guys talking and apparently they're selling a mermaid and a giant. That seems to be what has people excited, he told them. The people around here hate the fishmen and merfolk, he told them as they walked. If they really do have a mermaid, I wouldn't doubt it if the celestial dragons showed up. They all walked in silence from that point on. They made it to the auction house as everyone was arriving. Many of these people were older and most likely some sort of noble. They walked inside and sat almost in the center of the rows towards the left side if you're looking down from the entrance. Law and Naruto took their seats with the rest of the crew being one row behind them. Beppo even held on to Law's nodashi for him. As they waited for the auction to begin, they heard a man and a woman speaking about what they were looking to buy. One was in the market for a giant, whereas the old man was trying to buy some eye candy. These people are sick, Beppo said quietly. Shows how corrupt the Marines are if they turn a blind eye to this. Law says lazily. The seats began filling up fast, and as Naruto was seeing who was here, he felt an elbow to the ribs. Looking over, he noticed Law nod somewhere in the direction behind them. Turning his body around, he noticed that, there, next to the entrance, were the kid pirates. They were looking at the two celestial dragons that had just arrived and were making their way down. Celestial dragons, slaves, human shops. Hey. When the people in power act this cruel and greedy, it makes common criminals like us look pretty humane by comparison. When scum like that are the ones writing the rules, it creates more scum. Kid said. They hate pirates, but they're the ones who made them. At least we're honest about being bad people, right, killer? He asked his first mate. Seems like he feels the way we do somewhat to a degree. Law said. They watched as one of his crew members spotted them and told his captain. Kid looked to them and glared, still being pissed off about what had transpired earlier. He got even angrier when he saw Law smirk and flip him off. Kid began to walk forward but was stopped by Killer. Relax, Captain. If we cause a scene, the celestial dragons will get angry, and if we do anything to upset them, the Navy will send out an admiral, he said, reasoning with his hot-headed captain. Tisk. Just you two wait, Kid said angrily as he took one last moment to glare at them before turning away. Finally the auction began, and the first to be sold was a male slave, followed by a pack of male slaves. They were really selling people like they were a pack of soda. After those two, Disco announced that the next was a woman. She seemed to be rather young, perhaps in her mid-20s, and was dressed like a maid in a green and white outfit. Naruto overheard the same older man from the beginning saying how this one was his. He hears Disco mention how she could cook, clean, and good at a countless variety of games. Law. Naruto calls. The man glanced at him. She doesn't look like she's from Sabaody, does she? No, if I had to wager, I'd say she's been kidnapped. That's usually how people end up here, he replied. Naruto watched as she looked at everyone with frightened eyes before her eyes met his, and she mouthed, "Please help me." The crew heard the bids begin at 600,000 all the way to 3 million berry by the old man. How many people does the Polar Tang hold? Naruto asked suddenly. The crew looked at him and noticed he hadn't taken his eyes off of the girl. Likewise, she was still pleading for help. Law had an idea of what he was up to but responded anyways. It'll hold an entire crew of over 25 people. If she's not from around here and has nowhere to go, how would you feel about adding someone for a while? If she's got a family somewhere, we can just drop her off, he asked, shocking the crew members. Law sighs. For a feared pirate killer, you seem to have a lot more compassion than you let on. Go ahead, he told him. Any more bidders? Disco called out loudly. 3,500,000 berry. Naruto called out, holding up the number that was under his seat. Everyone turned to look at him, including the pirates, who seemed just as shocked to hear him make a bid on a person. 4,000. The old man began before Naruto cut him off, offering 5 million. The old man grit his teeth before standing up and yelling out 10 million berry. He turned to look at Naruto with a smug expression. 11 million. Naruto countered calmly. He had taken down numerous pirates worth over 100 million, this was nothing to him. The old man's mouth dropped in shock that he'd been outbid and watched as Disco danced around happily. Any more bids? He asked before slamming his mallet down on the wood. She's yours, number 44, for 11 million berry, he yelled loudly. Naruto watched as she sighed a breath of relief, knowing she wouldn't be sent to an old man. She now hoped that he'd be kind to her. Little did she know if she was from here, she'd be set free soon. Soon another female and a pirate captain were up for sale, in which the pirate captain decided to bite off his own tongue than to be taken a slave. As he was being tended to, they heard the sound of a door opening and another celestial dragon walking in. It was the same one from earlier today. Naruto felt a nudge on his shoulder. I thought you were killing him? Beppo asked. I'm still going to. I've been lowering his resistance to dairy slowly throughout the day. I'll off him right before we depart, he answered. The main attraction had finally appeared, and to most people's amazement it was a mermaid. Naruto recalled she was the same person that he'd briefly seen with Straw Hat earlier today. The bids didn't even get to begin as the moment she went on sale the fat celestial dragon bid 500 million berry. Even though there was no one to compete, Disco asked if there were any other bidders. As soon as he was finalizing the transaction, the entrance doors blew up. When the smoke cleared up, they saw Luffy yell for his friend before rushing down the stairs. This'll be interesting, Law said as he watched the events unfold. Unfortunately, his friend tried to hold him back, but in the process revealed 4 extra arms, allowing everyone to know he was a fishman. The crowd panicked and began throwing things at him before the celestial dragon that bought the mermaid shot him. The one they called Hachi rolled down a few sets of stairs before stopping. Luffy began walking towards his target before a hand grabbed him. Is he really about to kill a celestial dragon in front of everyone? Naruto thought to himself as Hachi tried to talk Luffy out of it. For a brief second it looked like he was successful, until the fat man sealed his fate by telling him he was annoying and was ready to shoot him again. That was the last straw as Luffy walked up to him, dodging the bullets as he fired. He pulled his hand back and punched him so hard he shot into the crowd up a few flights of stairs. It was completely silent. Everyone couldn't believe what they had just seen. Both Kid and Law smirked as they too couldn't believe that he was crazy enough to attack like that. You! Yelled the other celestial dragon. You dare touch my son, he yelled as he too pulled out a gun and began shooting at Luffy. The room erupted into panic as everyone minus the pirates began evacuating. Well, that 300 million berry bounty was definitely well earned, Law said as watched from his seat, not bothering to evacuate. That Straw Hat is one crazy bastard, Kid told Killer. The Straw Hats began fighting with the guards while trying to rescue their mermaid friend. We need to hurry before the Navy shows up, one of them yelled. Haste to fight, Law calls out. Luffy turns to him with a confused look. The Navy is already here. Luffy asked who he was but was ignored as the surgeon continued speaking. They've been here from before the auction even began. I don't know who they wanted, but I doubt they expected someone to punch a celestial dragon, he said. He then let out a small laugh before adding, that was an interesting show you guys gave. Naruto, however, tuned everyone out in favor of looking for Saint Charlos, as he now knew he was called. Damn, if I kill him, Straw Hat will probably get the credit for it. Damn it all, he cursed before he sensed a strong burst of haki. Looking at the source, he saw an older-looking man who any pirate worth a damn would know. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Silvers Rayleigh walked forward calmly to look at the situation. For an old man, he's still ridiculously strong, Naruto thought in amazement. If he wasn't impressed, then he was after watching the man remove the slave collar from the girl with his bare hands. Soon after, the skeleton from the Straw Hat crew gave the slaves the keys to the collars and set them free. Well, that saved me 11 million berry, he said to himself as he saw the girl leave. You must all be incredibly strong to withstand that, Silvers complimented. I never expected to meet such a big shot. Dark King, Silvers Rayleigh. What's a legendary man like you doing here? He asked. Before they could talk, everyone heard the voice of the Marines outside speak to them. All right, criminals, release the Roswacht family at once. An admiral will be arriving shortly. I suggest you turn yourselves in, they said. Not only are we caught up in this, but we're being treated like accomplices, Law says, not at all fazed. Well, I got to see Straw Hat do something crazy, so there's that. But I'd rather not run into an admiral if I can avoid it. I guess I can help you guys out and show you how a real pirate takes care of things, he said as he walked towards the entrance. This angered both Luffy and Law. This was the first time he'd seen his captain actually mad about something so far. Like, I'm going to let him show me up, Law says as he grabbed his Nodashi and followed suit. Luffy said nothing but also began walking. He stood up but said nothing and followed along as well. As he walked, he could hear them arguing about going back inside and who would be the one to take care of it. I told you to go back inside, I'll handle this, Kid said to them. Tell me what to do again and I'll begin by getting rid of you, Eustace, Law told him angrily. Law. I'm going to go make sure our ship is fine. If the Marines found it or seized it, we're screwed, I can't go the quick way, so I'll have to go the same way we came, he informed him. Law smirked. Yeah, I'll handle it here. Naruto dashed forward and ran directly at the Marines. He pulled out his blade and cut through them just enough to make a path to let him through. He could hear them begin firing at him before their attention was diverted back to the three captains. Soon enough he was deep enough in the trees to lose them. As he ran he heard multiple explosions behind him. They'll be fine. Some low-level pirates like that won't be enough to stop them, he thinks before continuing on. He ran for a good 5 minutes before stopping and jumping up onto the branch of a tree. Hiding behind one of the thicker branches he looked over and saw a bunch of Marines gathered. Tisk. Normally this would be easy work, but I don't want to fight a bunch of weaklings right now, he murmured to himself. Be on the lookout for Straw Hat, he heard one of them say. What about Kid-in-Law? Another one asked. Just look out for anyone over 100 million berry, a commander told them before they moved. He waited until they all passed him by and jumped down. He continued his run until finally he saw the town come into view. He suddenly stopped as he felt the ground shake violently. That was stronger than the ones I felt a few minutes ago, he thinks to himself. It came from up ahead, which means, he let a smile appear on his face. An admiral is here. He ran into town with a part of him hoping he'd run into whoever was sent. Once he made it into town he noticed it was mostly deserted. The knowledge of an admiral coming scared everyone enough to leave in a haste. When he made it to the center he noticed this part had people. Everyone seemed to be circled around a man in a yellow suite. Kizaru. Naruto cursed. Of all the people. Looking around to make sure he wasn't seen yet he noticed a recently abandoned building and saw something that caught his attention. That will come in handy considering Kizaru is here, he thought as he went to go retrieve it. When he got back he watched as the admiral walked up to Basil Hawkins and asked him a question. I'm looking for a man named Sentomaru, have you seen him? Captain Run, we'll hold him off, one of his crew members told him. Don't panic. I will not die today, Hawkins replied as he pulled out a deck of cards. Those cards aren't going to save you from him, man, Naruto thought. Combat. Chance of defeat 100%. Escape 12%. Hawkins began. Kizaru finally got fed up and asked again. I've never heard of such a person. Well, that leaves me with nothing to do, and I can't let someone with a bounty like yours go free. Kizaru says in his carefree way. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? He asked rhetorically as his leg was already inches away from the mon's face. This is it, Naruto whispered as he watched closely. His eyes showed Kizaru moving in slow motion as he kicked the man into the wall to their right. I see, he thought as he mentally rewinded what he'd just seen. He watched as Kizaru then shot a beam of light from his finger into the rubble that was Hawkins. Unfortunately for him, Hawkins remained standing without a single scratch on him. Their fight was on hold as crashing through another building was the mad monk Yuroge. He seemed to be in bad shape. From the same hold Kuma appeared and was walking towards the downed pirate. Soon after Drake joined the battle and took on the giant man by turning into a dinosaur via an ancient zone devil fruit. It proved to be useless as he transformed back only seconds later due to being blasted. Wasn't that Kizaru's attack? The blonde wondered. He watched as Yuroge stood up once more but was ultimately downed again as Kizaru casually kicked him through 4 buildings. The man effortlessly dispatched Scratchman Apu as well. It was at this point that the blonde decided he'd waited enough. He walked forward and coughed into his hand. The sound caught the admiral's attention and turned to look at him. What's this? The man asked. Naruto didn't grace the man with a response but was going over what he knew in his head. All right. His light-based attacks are mostly linear unless he uses his Yata no Kagami to bounce his light off any surface. Even then, any attack that turns him into light requires a second or so before taking effect, he thinks to himself. Well? Kizaru asked. You know I was going to capture the Straw Hat, Law, and Kid, but it seems you want to be first, he continued. I doubt it. Naruto replied, though I have noticed something, he added afterwards. The man tilted his head in confusion. Oh, what would that be? Out of everyone you fought you never bothered to dodge or block any attack, he told him. Yeah, I guess that's true, Kizaru admitted. But none of them really had a chance to do anything, you see, so I didn't really feel the need to, he answered lazily. So you don't block because you're certain they're no threat to you, Naruto told him. The admiral scratched his chin and answered, "When you say it like that it sounds really cocky." "Then since you're sure you'll win, you're not going to try and dodge this attack, are you?" he asked before appearing in front of him at fast speeds. He appeared in the air next to his head, his leg ready to kick him the same way he'd done to Yuroge earlier. As he suspected, Kizaru didn't move to block, just stood there with his hands in his pockets. At the last possible second, Naruto covered his leg in Busashoku Haki and managed to blast Kizaru through 2 buildings. Naruto landed and looked at the rubble with a smirk on his face. The smoke cleared out and the admiral walked out casually. Though he wasn't without damage, while not major, he did have some tears in his clothing and was bleeding from the side of the mouth a small amount. Apu managed to gain enough consciousness to look up in time to have witnessed it. The blonde was even stronger than he originally thought. He managed to wound an admiral, granted it wasn't by much, but he'd still done it. Whereas they'd all been dispatched without issue. "I see," began Kizaru as he wiped his mouth. "You're different than the rest. You used Haki to counter my Logia abilities just now, didn't you?" he asked as he cracked his neck. "Well, I can't underestimate you too much now, can I?" "Tell me, what's your name?" Kizaru asked. "The Death Dealer Uzumaki Naruto of the Heart Pirates," he introduced. It seemed the admiral knew him if his raised eyebrow was any indication. "The Death Dealer, you say? You've been handing us wanted pirates for a while, and now you're one of them," he said. "Why did you join up with Trafalgar Law? You'd make a great marine," he told him. "Because you guys turn a blind eye to what the celestial dragons do and are just as corrupt as some of the pirates," he answered without missing a beat. In a heartbeat he appeared in front of Kizaru with a slashing motion. This time the man did dodge and immediately brought his leg up. Naruto remembered this as the same technique he used on Haken. Faster than Kizaru expected, Naruto spun and kicked the mon's leg off to the side, resulting in a bright yellow blast hitting another tree. The blonde looked up to see the man pointing at him and began shooting beams of light at him. He jumped constantly to avoid being hit by any of them. He saw one coming towards him and jumped up, barely managing to avoid it. He noticed that Kizaru was to his right and had no time to react as he was hit with a light speed kick to the side. Just like the rest of the pirates, he was kicked into one of the empty buildings. "Damn, that hurt," he thought as he quickly left the building. Not a second sooner the whole thing exploded, no doubt from another kick. Taking a deep breath, he charged once more and began slashing rapidly. Kizaru evaded every strike seemingly without a problem. "Are you sure you won't join the Marines? Talent like yours shouldn't be wasted," the man asked again. His answer came in the form of another slash at him. Seeing as this wasn't working, he jumped back and caught his breath. "Damn it, nothing's working. He's toying with me. I only got him with that first attack because he was overconfident," he thought. He looked around and saw the state of their battlefield. Broken buildings, rubble, and cracks all around the floor. Wait, that was it. He charged at the man again, but this time Kizaru did more than dodge. As he slashed at him, the man moved faster than before and managed to hit him with another light speed kick into a building parallel from the first one. Naruto coughed up some blood and put his palm on top of one of the cracks that was leading outside. He allowed a black substance to seep into the ground. He stood up and continued the plan. He attacked again, this time faster than before. He slashed horizontally, and as soon as Kizaru ducked, he brought his hockey-coated leg to hit him. Unfortunately, he was parried and was hit with a hard fist to the gut. He was hit with enough force to drop him on the spot. Seeing another crack, he stealthily allowed another black substance to seep into it. This same routine happened one more time before the blonde decided it was all or nothing. Picking himself up, he wiped the blood from his mouth and stared down the admiral. "Oh, you're still able to fight. How scary," he taunted. "You like to taunt your opponent. Let's see how you like it," he thought. "Gift bad," he said. Kizaru watched as a large black pool appeared from the blonde and expanded enough to cover most of their battlefield. Kizaru looks down and sees the ground is still solid and tilts his head in confusion, wondering what was going on. Hearing a bubbling noise, he sees 3 large orbs appear on both sides of him and behind him. They appeared large enough to absorb a man completely. As he was about to ask the blonde, he began coughing and bleeding from the mouth. "Congratulations. You're stuck in my gift bad. This is one of the techniques that earned me the name, the Death Dealer. I won't go into the specifics, but just know your blood is slowly killing you now," Naruto told him. "Come on, take the bait," he thought. Kizaru coughs up some more blood. My blood, you say? Must be related to this substance, he said to himself. His body began to glow yellow and Naruto knew this was it. Bingo. Only one place to go now, he thought as he gripped his katana harder. He'd noticed Kizaru had a habit of appearing behind his opponents before kicking them away. The moment he saw the man completely covered in light, he coated his blade in haki and turned around. Just as Kizaru reappeared behind him, a splash of blood was seen as Naruto managed to cut the mon's torso right as he materialized. In the brief moment of surprise, Naruto grabbed the mon's admiral jacket from his shoulder and took off. It had been a difficult task to have Kizaru end up behind him. Now all he had to do was make a break for Grove 20. As he ran, he remembered what he had taken from the building before his fight even started. It was probably cracked, but it should still work. As he sprinted away, he heard it. Yada no Kagami. Knowing he only had one shot, he turned around and brought out a conveniently sized mirror. Luckily, it only had one crack in it. He saw the light coming and allowed the light to reflect in another direction devoid of any building and dropped the mirror. He picked up his speed and took off. Fly looked back and saw Kizaru wasn't coming. Whether he let him get away or his plan worked he couldn't tell, but he didn't care. I got way in over my head thinking I stood a chance. I'm no match for Kizaru, yet. He thought as he headed for the sub. After 2 minutes of non-stop sprinting, he made it and ran inside. It appeared that his fight with Kizaru had taken longer than he'd thought, as the entire crew was already there and they had a new addition. We gotta go now, he told them. Beppo, having never seen the blonde this worked up, quickly set up the sub and submerged. He took a seat and caught his breath. Now that they were in the clear, he noticed they were pretty roughed up as well. What happened to you guys? He asked, wondering how some low-level Marines could do this much damage. We were attacked by Kuma, Law said, frowning. Hearing this, the blonde also frowned. How? I saw Kuma beating ex-Drake and Uroge, he told them. Perhaps they were clones then, Beppo said out loud. Beppo took a look at him and noticed the blonde himself was in pretty bad shape. What happened to you? He asked. I ran into Kizaru. The crew's eyes widened at the revelation. Shachi was the first to break the silence. No way. You ran into an admiral and survived, he said with amazement. He underestimated me, but in the end he still won. I only managed to land 2 hits on him. A kick and 1 cut to his body. I took much more damage than he did. Penguin, who hadn't said anything, noticed what the blonde was holding and his eyes almost popped out of his head. Is that Kizaru's admiral jacket? He asked. Naruto smirked. Yeah. The bastard was taunting me the whole time, so I figured I'd pay him back for it. I planned a trap as I was getting beaten and took his coat in the brief moment of surprise after I cut him. He explained. He winced as he tried standing. Honestly, I'm surprised I made it here. I'm sure Kizaru will probably aim to kill me next time. Finally, he looked towards the others and asked, What's Jean Bart doing here? Navy headquarters. 3 men were standing in attention. All 3 men were dressed in a very similar fashion. The first 2 were tall individuals. One wore a red suit underneath a long white jacket with the kanji reading, Justice, on the back. The second wore a blue suit with the same jacket, though he had a light blue sleeping mask resting on his forehead. These 2 men were some of the greatest powers the Navy had to offer. Admiral Kuzan, Aokiji, and Admiral Sakazuki, Akainu. The final man standing next to them wore a yellow suit similar to that of his fellow Marines. Like the other 2, he was the 3rd Admiral of the Marines. Borsellino, Kizaru. Currently the men were listening to Fleet Admiral Sengoku go on about something the Celestial Dragons wanted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they moved on to the next topic. Kizaru. Sengoku barked, getting the Mont's attention. Where are the straw hats? After Monkey D. Luffy punched St. Charlos, the family wanted his head. Kizaru briefly used his pinky to clean his ear out before answering. I got preoccupied with Dark King, Rayleigh. During that time, Bartholomew Kuma managed to send them away one by one. I don't know where they are, he explained. Even in his age, Rayleigh hasn't lost his touch, he added as an afterthought, remembering how his kick was deflected with ease. Sengoku clicked his teeth in annoyance and took a drink of water. And what of the others? There was other pirates on Sabaody. Any of interest? Kizaru scratched his chin. Actually, a lot of rookies were there, all of which had bounties of over 100 million berry. The most notable one, though, he trailed off. Uzumaki Naruto. Though he's more widely known as the Death Dealer. That got everyone's attention. He's the one that was hunting pirates whose bounty was over 100 million, right? Aokiji asked. Kizaru nodded. Was he involved in the attack on the Celestial Dragon along with the Straw Hats? Came the gruff voice of Akainu. Perhaps. Kizaru answered. What I do know is that he's joined up with the Heart Pirates under Trafalgar Law. Trafalgar Law, the Surgeon of Death, Sengoku muttered. He'd heard of him. He had the potential to be a real threat in the future. He's one to look out for as well. Out of all of the rookies there, Uzumaki Naruto is the one we have to be the most weary of. Skill and power-wise he's above them. He explained, drawing a curious look from Aokiji and even a raised eyebrow from Akainu. We fought briefly and he demonstrated the ability to use Busashoku Haki. He managed to stop one of my attacks and even managed to slightly injure me, he confessed. That came as a surprise to his fellow admirals and even the fleet admiral. It had been a while since a pirate actually managed to injure the Pika Pika no Mi user. Granted, I wasn't taking the fight too seriously to begin with, but it's still to be noted, Kizaru added. The Death Dealer is stronger than we believed, Aokiji commented. Is he a devil fruit user? Asked Akainu. The lazy admiral confirmed. He has a unique devil fruit ability. He was able to make my own blood poisonous to me. I only managed to cancel the effects of it because I'm Ilogia. He's a good tactician. He was able to come up with a plan even as I was beating him down. His tone carrying what could be interpreted as a hint of respect. Even if he was a pirate. Sengoku sat in silence as he listened to Kizaru tell his story. A fruit like the one he had just described was dangerous. Making one's own blood poisonous to them was a terrifying ability. Without knowing exactly how it works, it puts them at a huge disadvantage. The fact that he knows how to use Haki didn't make the situation any better. As far as the world is concerned, he doesn't have a bounty on his head, Aokiji said. That has to change. Sengoku nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. He may not be on the same level as the Yonko in terms of ability or power, but he's the strongest out of the new generation. As of this moment he will have a bounty of 500 million berry, he announced. He made a quick call on his Den Den Mushi, putting the order out to have look for a picture of the man and have the wanted posters made immediately. All right. With that settled, did the three of you read the message? Aokiji and Akainu both nodded while Kizaru tilted his head in slight confusion. He began patting his pockets and back pockets. Akainu and Sengoku were looking at him with aggravation clear on their faces while Aokiji was shaking his head in slight amusement. Oh, it looks like I may have misplaced that letter you gave us, he said as he continued patting himself down. He stopped and snapped his fingers in realization. That's right, I put it in jacket, he trailed off, remembering what had happened. This did not go unnoticed by his colleagues. Akainu looked at him, a frown on his face. Kizaru, where is your jacket? Uzumaki maneuvered me into a position where my attack would be easy to read. He used a Haki-embedded sword to cut me across the chest. In that moment of surprise he swiped it right off my shoulders and made a run for it. He explained, a bit embarrassed at having to say that out loud. With your power you could have easily caught up to him and detained him, Sengoku countered. I tried. I used Yada no Kagami to catch up to him, but he was prepared. He used a mirror to deflect me away. When I was back to normal I got word from Sentomaru about the Straw Hats and it took priority. I forgot that I had that letter in there, he admitted. You fool! Sengoku yelled. That letter contained important information. Who knows what he'll do with that intel? The fleet admiral took a deep breath to calm himself. It would do them no good if he let his emotions take control of him. We'll discuss this later. For now prioritize getting the bounty on Uzumaki's head out, he ordered before dismissing them. Meanwhile, somewhere out at sea a lone ship had been sailing across the ocean. At a glance one would see a regular Navy vessel. However, looking closer they'd see the ship was almost completely deserted. Only two could be seen on the ship. The first was the blonde former bounty hunter. He saw atop a cannon on the edge of the ship, watching the waves as the ship coasted. The second was a lone marine, having been the only one Naruto had spared and forced to navigate the ship. At first the Navy had been reluctant to let him borrow a ship, but after a few minutes there was no one who had any complaints about it. He looked up to the sky, remembering how he had ended up in this position. Flashback inside his room in the Polar Tang. Naruto took the time to admire the souvenir he had gotten from Sabaody. It fit him a little too big seeing as Kizaru was easily 4 feet taller than him. Still it looked good on him. I still can't believe I actually got away with it, he said to himself. A pirate wearing the code of justice. Ironic. This is going to piss the Marines off to no end, he commented as he dug into the pockets he had found. As he dug around the right pocket he felt something. Paper. I think I hit the jackpot, he commented. As an admiral he had no doubt they must have been paid very well. He pulled it out and frowned when he saw an envelope instead of Barry. Turning it around he saw "Confidential" written across the envelope. Quickly tearing it open he unfolded the letter, sat down on his bed and began reading. It only took a few minutes to read the contents of the letter. He turned the sheet of paper around to see if it was double-sided, but it wasn't. Standing up he headed for the main room in the sub. Law had to read this. His captain was sitting up against a wall silently as he polished his blade when he noticed him approach. He looked down at his hand, noticing the envelope, and raised a single eyebrow, silently asking what that was about. "You're gonna want to read this," Naruto commented as he handed him the letter. His curiosity grew as he noticed Law's frown deepen the more he read. "Joker is sending large shipments of something to Kaido frequently," Law parroted. "I've heard the name Joker around, but I don't think I've ever seen him. Don't recall a bounty on his head either." "I'd know about it," Naruto commented as he sat next to Beppo, who was currently piloting the sub. "I didn't know he was working for Kaido of the Beasts either," he added. Law folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. "You have seen him before. You know him as Don Quixote Doflamingo," he told him, his voice filled with hate as he named the man. "You have a problem with him." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Law confirmed. "He's at the very top of my shit list." Naruto didn't comment on it anymore after that. He knew there was story there, but he'd wait for Law to tell him of his own volition. "He wasn't working for Kaido as far as I knew. This just got a whole lot harder," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Why is that, Captain?" Beppo asked, having taken an interest in the conversation. It was Naruto who responded. "If Doflamingo is working for Kaido, and we happen to kill the man, it'll affect Kaido as well, since he's currently using Doflamingo for something. If it's that important to Kaido, I have no doubt we'll be on his shit list too." The rest of the crew had gathered around at this point to listen in, and they all shared the same reaction. Fear. "As much as I believe in my own strength and the crew's overall, we can't take Kaido as we are," the first mate said. "So what now?" Shachi asked. "We'll need allies. Strong ones," Law said as he stared at the ground. It stayed quiet for a moment as everyone waited for him to continue. He looked up and made eye contact with Naruto and continued. "I have a job for you," he said as he pulled out some wanted posters and handed them to him. "I want you to scout possible allies for us, namely the other supernovas." Naruto took the posters and glanced at them briefly. "That could help out," he agreed. "It'll increase our chances of survival when we reach the new world." Law smirked. "That's the idea. We'll drop you off on the next island over. There's a small marine base there, should be easy enough for you to get in. Take a ship and engage whoever you think would make suitable allies," he ordered. Naruto watched as his captain went to his room briefly and came back with something in his hand. "Take this. We'll stay in contact," he said, handing him a Mushi. Naruto had to stifle a chuckle as he looked at the snail with a similar small hat like Law's. "And what will you be doing in the meantime?" Naruto asked as he pocketed the snail. "I'm going to meet with some of my informants." Flashback end. Kaido of all people, he said to himself. If he had to try and take on one of the Yonko, he'd rather it have been red-haired Shanks or Big Mom. But he couldn't lie and say that the thought of fighting Kaido didn't somewhat excite him. He was broken from his thoughts as he felt the ship shake. "Oi, keep it steady," he yelled at the lone marine. The poor guy was shaking as he saw Naruto glare at him. He had watched as his brothers tried putting up a fight against the blonde only to be cut down with ease. Shaking his head in exasperation, Naruto pulled out the wanted posters Law had given him. He began cycling through them, weighing the pros and cons of each one he saw. "Basil Hawkins," he read out loud as he looked at the picture. "Decent bounty, but no, I don't really want to rely on someone who uses cards to make decisions," he said as he thought about how Hawkins had been blitzed by Kizaru. In his peripherals something caught his attention. Ahead of them, in the distance, was another ship. He squinted his eye trying to make out who it belonged to. Finally he caught a break and managed to make out the Jolly Roger. It was a skeleton atop what looked to be a pizza with a bite having been taken out of both. Jewelry Bonnie. He cycled through the posters until he came to hers. 140 million berry bounty. Her crew isn't much to write home about, but she is. He briefly got an image of her full from Sabaody. She was pretty hot. He also remembered how she had somehow transformed into a kid to stop Roronoa Zoro from killing the celestial dragon. She can age and de-age herself and probably everyone around her too. That could be very useful. He nodded, having made his decision. Oi Marine. Head towards that ship. He ordered, pointing with his blade at the Bonnie pirates. They must have also noticed him because their ship had stopped in place. As they got closer he noticed that the crew was gathering on the main deck looking in his direction. Bonnie was also there, eating a slice of pizza. Once they were close enough he had the Marine drop the anchor and stop parallel to their ship. He stood at the edge of the boat facing them and spoke. Jewelry Bonnie. I'm Uzumaki Naruto of the Heart Pirates. May I come aboard? Why should I let you do that? She asked angrily as she looked at the ship he was on. For all I know you got the Marines ready to capture me. You are a known bounty hunter after all. I used to be. I'm here on behalf of the Heart Pirates now. The only Marine on this ship is the one I have navigating. He explained. He could see her crew shaking their heads. No. But she continued to stare at him. Fine. She conceded, but if you try something funny I'll turn you into a fetus. She threatened as she stepped aside. Seeing this, Naruto went over to the Marine and threw him over his shoulder before jumping onto Bonnie's ship. You guys mind tying him up? He asked her. I still kinda need him. She nodded at one of her guys who quickly went to get some rope and began tying him up. You said you were here on behalf of the Heart Pirates. Usually when dealing with other crews the captain would do it himself. Why isn't Law here instead? She asked as she grabbed more food from one of her crew members. He's meeting up with some informants right now. Anyways, onto why I'm here. I'm proposing an alliance between our two crews, he said, getting straight to the point. An alliance, huh? She took a bite of some chicken. What do we get out of it? A powerful ally. It's common knowledge that Law is strong, but you've seen firsthand that I am as well. The three of us and our two crews could go far in this world together, he told her. She was quiet, thinking things over. She had been there when he had almost killed Kid. He didn't even need to touch him to have him on the ground, his own blood killing him. He definitely was strong. She walked away and nodded her head at her guys to follow her. Once out of earshot she asked, so what do you guys think? Her first mate looked over at Naruto before turning his attention back to the crew. I think it'd be a good idea, Captain. We know he's strong. Him and Law. Plus, haven't you noticed what he's wearing? He asked. Immediately everyone's heads moved to stare at the blonde. They all noticed he was wearing a jacket in the same fashion that the high-ranking Marines and Whitebeard do. Is that what I think it is? Someone asked. The first mate nodded. Yeah, it has the golden cuffs and the golden shoulder guards. Plus Kizaru was missing his jacket when we last saw him. There's no way Kizaru just handed it to him. It had to be taken, he reasoned. Bonnie turned around and walked back towards him. How did you get the jacket? She asked. His answer would help her make her decision. I swiped it from him while we fought. I'll admit I got kind of lucky, but I did manage to injure him slightly. That should speak well of my skill, wouldn't you agree? So do we have a deal? He asked, holding his hand out. Fine. She took his hand. Tell Law we accept. Naruto was going to reply but stopped as he heard a pero coming from his pocket. He took it out and stared at it. I really should have asked Law how to use this. Bonnie heard this and palmed her face, wondering if she made a mistake. She swiped it from his hand and placed it up to his face. Naruto, can you hear me? He heard Law's voice. Yeah, I was actually going to try and call you soon. I'm with Jewelry Bonnie right now. They've agreed to an alliance with us. He informed him. Only 2 days and you've already got us an alliance. I'm impressed, he complimented. I don't know if you had anyone else in mind but put in on hold for now. I just got word that Fire Fist Ace is to be executed in 5 days. He revealed. Everyone on the ship wore looks of shock. He's going to be executed at Marineford. It's going to be a televised broadcast. Where are you now? We're west of Sabaody. Maybe half a day's time, Bonnie told him. Alright, we're not too far away. Stay there, we're on our way to get you. Law told him before he cut the connection. You guys don't mind me staying here for a bit, do you? He asked her. She shook her head no and told him as long as he didn't eat all her food he was fine. He threw the Marine back on the Navy ship, still tied up. He powered the ship back on and let it set sail in a random direction before jumping back on Bonnie's ship. It took almost all day before Law finally made it to him. In that time he tried to get to know the captain a little better. Unfortunately for him, she seemed to be more interested in eating than talking to him. He would have made a crude remark but remembered that she would turn him into a fetus. He decided not to take his chance just yet. Her crew had potential, they just had to be trained correctly. Overall, he thinks they could be beneficial in the future. Once back in the polar tang, it was back to the issue at hand. So Ace has been captured. Law nodded. The details of his capture haven't been made public. All I know is that Straw Hat Luffy has broken into Impel Down and is most likely headed to Marineford as well. Are we going to go to Marineford, Captain? Beppo asked. I have no plan to at the moment. They're going to televise it at Sabaody. We'll watch from there. Naruto's head snapped up to their captain. Why not? It has nothing to do with us. We don't need to get in the middle of a war like that. He reasoned. Shachi and Penguin nodded, happy that they weren't going. Naruto, however, began thinking of all the big-name players that were likely to be there. The three admirals, Whitebeard, Marco, the Shichibukai, even Luffy. Don't look at it like that then, Naruto said. Knowing that we may very well have to fight Kaido, we're going to need allies, right? If we help Whitebeard stop Ace's execution, he'll owe us one. Having the strongest man in the world, one of the Yonko, on our side would increase our chances dramatically. He countered. And if Straw Hat is heading there too, we could probably make an alliance with him as well. He could see it was working as Law went quiet and mulled it over, most likely weighing the pros and cons. After what felt like eternity, Law spoke. Beppo, make a quick stop at Sabaody, we're gonna need some supplies. Then set the course to Marineford, he ordered. How will we actually get in though? Shachi asked. They won't open the gate of justice for us. We go underneath it then, Naruto replied. A sub has that advantage. I'll be willing to bet Whitebeard does the same thing. Beppo nodded in agreement and set the course. They'd be heading to Marineford soon. I'm going to have the time of my life, Naruto thought as a wide grin came across his face. Deep underwater in a yellow sub, the Heart Pirates had been on the move for 3 days. The atmosphere was tense to say the least. Many different thoughts plagued the crew regarding where they were going. Though they had all agreed on their destination, it was still something they were apprehensive about. The long trip only managed to make some members a little more uneasy. Despite being relatively close to Impel Down, they were still 2 days away. They managed to re-up on their immediate needs after leaving Bonnie and were now going full speed to Navy headquarters. At the rate we're going, we'll be there on the day of Ace's execution, Beppo commented as he walked to the main deck of the sub. He had left the vessel on autopilot for the time being, seeing as they were going in a straight line from this point on. Captain, there's going to be some really powerful people there. What's our plan? We can't just rush in, he questioned. Law nods. When we arrive, you and the rest are going to stay on the ship. We'll need to be ready for an escape should it come down to it. Naruto and I will head into the battlefield to try and retrieve Ace. We're going to get into Whitebeard's good graces. The man holds family in high regard. This is sure to secure us an alliance for when we enter the new world, he began. We're going to help the Whitebeard pirates by clearing a path for them. No doubt the admirals will be targeting him and his commanders. We'll prevent anyone from stopping him, he finished. Captain, aren't you too worried? Penguin asked, referring to Law and the blonde who was cleaning his blade. You might die. We're risking death going into the new world as well. Everything in the world is a gamble. No risk, no reward, Law explained. Things quieted down for a minute after that. Law took a look at his crew one by one. He knew they were nervous, but that was to be expected. Finally he turned to his first mate. He was oddly quiet. Considering it was him who talked him into going, he'd expected more. He was also slightly amused that the blonde had taken the admiral jacket and made it part of his daily attire. You haven't said anything for a while now. Something on your mind? Law asked. Naruto stopped his cleaning and looked up to see the attention on him. I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm kind of excited. he started. Law only nodded, knowing that his first mate was somewhat of a battle freak. But at the same time I'm nervous. The last time I fought an admiral I got lucky. I caught him off guard, and chasing the Straw Hats probably took precedent, which is why I managed to get away. That was just one person. This time all 3 admirals are going to be present, plus the Shichibukai. It's going to be tough, he confessed. Seeing him take a deep breath, the rest of the hard pirates stayed quiet, waiting for their comrade to finish saying his piece. Up until now I've fought and killed 100 million very small name pirates. Then there was Kid, but he doesn't count. This time there's some real heavy hitters. It's going to show me where I really rank in the world. I need to make sure I'm at the top of my game. This will show me where I need to improve, he finished. Now it made sense. It was strange though to see the blonde so serious. Usually when they were submerged he'd spend his time cleaning his blade, counting his money, or exchanging stories of the women they've been with Shachi and Penguin. But they understood. He was going to be going out into the front lines with their captain. He needed to be focused because if he wasn't it could mean death. With that the crew once again fell into silence. It was going to be a long 2 days. 2 days later at Marineford, the Whitebeard pirates had made a grand entrance in the middle of the bay. 43 allied ships had also made their way to Marineford to back up the strongest man in the world. No one at the Marine HQ had expected them to show up the way they had, but they weren't deterred. The admiral had frozen not just the waves but also the entirety of the bay where the Whitebeard pirates' ships were docked. Now having solid ground, the pirates jumped down and began to raid the HQ. Most of the commanders of the crew, sans a few, had also jumped down to help their brethren. Eventually, seeing that they weren't making enough progress in holding the pirates back, Kizaru took it upon himself to attack the king of the chessboard. As Kizaru used his Yasukani no Magatama, his attack was blocked by the 1st Division commander Marco, who used his mythical zone fruit powers to stop the attack. As all the fighting was going on, some of the heavier attacks had actually managed to break some of the ice in the bay. It was in one of the gaps in the ice that Whitebeard noticed something from underwater. The man frowned. He knew something was down there, but it wasn't time for that to be revealed. He watched, still unmoving from his spot on his ship, as a shape took form before it surfaced. A submarine. At this point the entirety of the Navy as well as the pirates had noticed the newcomers. Coming out of the front door on the main deck of the sub were a black-haired man and a blonde-haired man. "We're late," the blonde commented as he looked around. Law smirked at his first mate. "Be glad we made it here as easily as we did," he commented before looking up to meet the gaze of Whitebeard. "Oi brats." Whitebeard called out to them. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Whitebeard. Naruto greeted. He was about to introduce them when he was cut off by the 3rd Division commander, Diamond, Jozu. "We know who you two are," he spoke, looking at them. "The Surgeon of Death, Trafalgar Law. The Death Dealer, Uzumaki Naruto. You currently have the record for the highest entry-level bounty issued by the world government at 500 million berry," he announced. Those who hadn't yet heard of him or his bounty were impressed. "You know our names? We're honored," Naruto commented. "You still haven't answered my question, brat. What are you doing here?" Whitebeard asked again. "We're here willing to lend you a hand to rescue Fire Fist, Ace. It's not an easy job. The more hands you have on your side the better your chances are, don't you agree?" Law answered. Whitebeard studied them for a second before his eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Everyone knew what he meant. They wanted something in return for helping them. Those listening in both on the marine side and pirate side had wide eyes, hearing people try and get something out of the world's strongest man. Naruto was the one who answered this time. "You owe us one if we help you save Ace." Whitebeard slammed his Basento with a bit of force, creating a small shockwave as a small show of power. "What can you two do to help us?" It was a fair question. He had some of the strongest people in his crew after all. "This isn't a place for some rookies," he added. At this point a normal person would have backed off, seeing that his help wasn't needed, but not him. He joined Law to help achieve his own goals, but also gave his word to help his captain achieve his, and that's what he'd do. "You're gonna need more help and you know it. You must have some idea of what we're capable of. Do you want to save your son or not?" he questioned with a defiant look on his face. The Whitebeard pirates watched, impressed with how 2 rookies were standing up to their pops. The captain, however, was staring back at the two with a fierce glare the whole time. Finally, he smirked. We'll owe you one if you show yourselves to be key players in this war.
Deal, they replied before looking at the battlefield. Law, Naruto called. The man knew what he meant and nodded before they both disappeared from their spots on the ship.
Naruto appeared in the middle of the ice-covered battlefield in between a bunch of marines. He wasted no time and went to work. He unsheathed his blade and cut down the first low-level marine in front of him before turning around and lifting his blade to block the sword strike coming his way. Shoving the blade out of his face, he countered with his own slash and cut the man in the chest. He moved aside without looking back and blocked two swords coming at him. He kicked the first man out of his way before turning to the other who rushed in at him. It took zero effort on his part to parry the blade and cut the man in the jugular before spinning and cutting the one that was getting back up.
Low-level marines, how boring, he commented as he swiped his blade towards the ground, cleaning his blade in the process. He looked forward and up, keeping his gaze on Ace on the scaffold. Looking down, he saw Akainu sitting on his chair, not even slightly alarmed. Below him he saw a sea of white and blue. Even though they're low level, getting through so many of them will be a hassle, he thought to himself.
He felt the ground shake slightly and looked back to see Jozu picking up a giant piece of ice from the frozen bay before hurling it towards Akainu. God damn, he mumbled, seeing that feat of strength. He watched as the ice ball made its way towards the admiral but was stopped as said man used his magma powers to destroy it. That would have been too easy, he commented as the admiral sat back down. He didn't have much time to get back to the action as Whitebeard had something in mind. Shortly after the attack, the ground once again started shaking, but different from last time. This time it felt like steps. Sure enough, the biggest man Naruto had ever seen stepped onto the scene. The man was huge, for lack of a better word. He managed to swipe most of the marines in front of them away with a single slash of his blade. Little Oars Jr., as he heard him be called, was making his way for the scaffold with very little effort. It seemed that no matter what he did, he would simply shrug the technique off. Oars! Ace yelled as he watched his friend be attacked by the marines. Oars made his way towards the plaza with little difficulty. At least he was, until one of the Shichibukai went on the offensive. Kuma charged what seemed to be a paw before shooting it towards the giant. The paw touched the man before expanding and exploding. Naruto had to shield his face from the debris and ice that flew at him. Once everything calmed down, he looked in mild shock to see the bloodied body of the giant. The least I can do is take one of the Shichibukai down, he heard Oars mumble as he tried to swipe down at them. Naruto noticed something blur into the sky the moment Oars' hand was close to making contact. At that same moment, everyone noticed the giant's foot fly into the air, having been cleanly cut off. Doflamingo, he thought as he heard a low-pitched laugh and a thud near him as the man landed. Naruto gripped his blade, feeling his heart start beating and his blood pumping just a little faster. This action did not go unnoticed by the exuberant man. Oh, the Death Dealer, how interesting, Doflamingo commented with a large smile. My first big-name opponent has arrived. He was easily able to cut through Oars' leg. I'm going to have to be careful, he thought as he turned to fully face the man. I had heard you joined the Heart Pirates. Why join that bunch? He asked. Because I knew joining him would help me achieve my goals, Naruto answered. Goals, you say? And what would those be? Naruto didn't know if he genuinely wanted to know or if he was just stalling, but humored him anyway. Two of them you wouldn't care about, but one of them is to fight and beat the strongest people in the world. You happen to be on that list. Doflamingo let out a hearty laugh. Wonderful. I'm happy to hear that, Naruto-kun. He brought his left hand up and stiffly moved his fingers. Naruto's eyes glowed a very faint blue before he quickly moved aside. Behind him, part of the ice that had been made by Aokiji was cut like butter. He didn't have time to rest as Doflamingo was quickly on him. The man jumped into the air before making a slashing motion downwards with his hand in his direction. Seeing this, he dodged and weaved out of the way as more thin lines appeared to be digging into the ground. What the hell is he using? Naruto questioned to himself. He flipped backwards to avoid being cut like the ground where he had previously been and dashed forward at the man. Quickly pulling the blade out, he began trying to slice the man. Doflamingo wasn't one of Shichibukai for nothing. It seemed as he would jump back and dodge just as well as he would. After one more slash that the man jumped over, both men put some distance between each other. The two stared each other down, both taking small breaths, though Doflamingo still had his wide smile in place. In a flash, Naruto appeared in front of the man and tried a horizontal slash, hoping to cut the man in half. However, he just missed as Doflamingo had jumped high into the air and began swiping the air. Knowing what was coming, he flipped and weaved away from the invisible attacks. He looked up and saw the man seemingly floating in mid-air. "What's the matter, Naruto-kun?" he taunted. "I can't hit him while he's up there. I have no choice but to wait for him to come back down," he thought as he moved to the right to avoid being cut yet again. After a couple of minutes, the man did come down and immediately began using his fingers to attack again. Naruto dodged the attacks and jumped away from the man. "Hee, looks like I'm too much for you. Why don't you run along and look for some of the weaklings you're used to fighting?" Doflamingo asked while laughing, enjoying taunting his fellow blonde. Naruto took a deep breath before closing his eyes. For a second he kept them closed before they snapped open again. His eyes once again having taken a very faint blue tint. He rushed forward prepared to try a downward slash. Having seen this coming, Doflamingo took to the air again. His smile turned to a frown as the moment he jumped, Naruto had disappeared from in front of him. Those watching the battle were shocked when they saw a black-coated foot connect with the back of the man's head, sending him straight back down. Both Marines and pirates alike had their eyes considerably widened as they saw the man hit the ground face first before rolling aside to avoid a stomp that cracked the ice where he had just been. Doflamingo got up quickly and turned to face Naruto. He brought his hand up and used it to swipe at his mouth. His usual smile was replaced with a frown as he noticed the back of his hand was stained red with blood from his lip. Hee, is that all you're capable of, Dofi-kun?" Naruto asked, doing a crude imitation of the man. Doflamingo didn't reply. Instead, he quickly moved his fingers and began swiping at the air. Cuts began to appear all around the battlefield. None of them, however, were hitting their intended target. Naruto moved around quickly before moving in for an attack. As he got closer, he quickly coated his blade in Busashoku Haki and brought it up defensively in front of him. He felt something collide with the blade but did no damage to him. He tilted his head slightly as saw a flash of something thin with a white sheen to it. "Are those strings?" he asked himself. He jumped aside and noticed another bit of ice had been cut cleanly. "They're strings. So he's a Paramecia type that can control strings," he deduced. Not wanting to get on the defensive again, and ran forward, using his blade to counter any strings that were aimed for him. Once close enough, he jumped, spinning rapidly as he tried a kick to the head. However, unlike the other times, Doflamingo actually met his foot with his own. They split for a second before the pink-coated man tried to cut his head off with his strings. Naruto managed to duck as a thin line passed above his head, killing an innocent Marine behind them. "You're not going to get past me, Naruto-kun. How about you join me instead? If you do, I won't kill you," Doflamingo proposed.
"The only one that's going to die is you," Naruto countered before disappearing from his spot. Like before, the Shichibukai sensed the attack and began to take to the sky. Though unlike his time, the blonde met him in the sky with a black-coated blade. His strings were cut like butter as he tried to use them to defend himself. Those still watching the battle saw a splash of blood spray from the exuberant man's chest as he was blasted back and crashed into the ice. Naruto landed and brought his right hand up, creating a small black substance at his palm. He flicked his middle finger at his opponent, willing the ball to shoot at him. As the black ball made its way, it was cut in half by strings. The string user took to the skies, rapidly moving across the battlefield. He noticed, however, that the orbs were still being shot at him, at a rapid pace. He spun in the air, slashing at the air, cutting more orbs in half. To his frustration, for every orb he cut, two took its place. He landed quickly and noticed that those he had managed to dodge had hit the ground, if the amount of dead Marines was any indicator. Damn him and his flying, Naruto thought as an explosion rocked nearby. "I need to keep him from taking to the sky." He glanced around briefly and noticed Law cutting down a large group of Marines. "Law," Naruto called out. Ha, calling for backup now, are you?" Doflamingo asked mockingly. Naruto inwardly cursed but said nothing. The man really knew how to get under someone's skin. Law made his way over and took a look at the man he hated most. He smirked as he saw the long slash that now marred the mont's uncovered chest. "I need a room. Approximately 50 feet in diameter. About 12 feet tall. Can you manage that?" Naruto asked.
Law did as he was told and used his devil fruit powers to create the room with those exact dimensions. As he was going to speak, he was stopped by their opponent. Law, you know even this won't work against me. You really want me to kill you, don't you? He asked, his smile growing as he watched the mon's face lose its cool. Don't let him get to you, Captain. Naruto told him. Thank you for the room. I'm going to need you to step out of it now. He added, surprising both of them. Doflamingo was sure they were going to try and double-team him while in there. What were they planning? If I step out of the room I won't be able to manipulate everything in it, Law replied. Don't worry. I don't need you to. Trust me on this. Naruto pleaded, not taking his eyes off the tall man. The moment he looked away he didn't doubt he'd attack. Law stared at him for a minute before taking one last look at Doflamingo before nodding and jumping back. Though he did stay close by in case he needed to step in. Their enemy continued to have his smile on the outside, but inside was a different story. He knew all about the Oppo no Mi and how it worked. It would be unbeneficial for Law to leave. The room would have no effect without him. Gift Barrack. Naruto announced. Everyone watched as multiple white donut-shaped lines of light appeared around the perimeter of the room before connecting together. Soon 3 layers were connected throughout the room. All right, that should be enough. Naruto commented with a smirk. He rushed forward, blade drawn, and slashed at the man. Doflamingo leaned backwards to avoid the slash before jumping back to avoid the others. Seeing them come at him faster, he tried to take to the skies. He didn't see the smirk on the blonde's face as he tried. Unlike the other times where he'd be safe in the sky, this time he collided with the top of the room. We're inside my gift barrack now. As long as I keep this up, neither of us is leaving here. Naruto commented, letting Doflamingo understand what was going on. It was time for him to take control of the fight. Doflamingo jumped back as a black blade cracked the ground where he had been standing. He tried using his strings but wasn't allowed to as the blonde was on him. Now he knew what was going on. The blonde cut him off from flying, and limited his movement. Naruto slashed at him before using the momentum from the slash to try and reverse kick him in the head again. He was met by a forearm but wasn't deterred. He stabbed the blade into the ground and propelled off of it and pointed his hands towards the man. Gift ball. He called out as he made a giant black orb. He knew it would be countered, but he only needed it for a second. As fast as it was created it was destroyed. However, that was all the time Naruto needed. As soon as the ball was split in two, he rushed through the middle blade at the ready. It was only due to the battles he'd been in throughout his life that Doflamingo was able to lean back in time to have the blade narrowly miss him. Though he did notice some of his hair fly into the wind. He let off a series of strings, only some of which managed to barely scratch him before landing a kick to the death dealer's chest, pushing him back slightly. He used this opportunity to jump to the opposite end of the room and take some deep breaths, his fellow blonde doing the same. Damn. We're evenly matched. He's fast and has good defense. I wanted to cut him up into pieces, but looks like I won't get that luxury. Still, we're in my gift barrack, which means I win, he thought. Well, Doflamingo, you're definitely strong, but it's time for you to die. Gift bad. Naruto said as the ground below them turned pitch black. For the first time in the fight, Doflamingo's eyes widened. Not that anyone could see that with his glasses on as he realized what was about to happen. He had heard what had happened at Sabaody with Kid. This wasn't good. In a hurry, he tried to slash at the air to break through the room, but it was for naught. In that brief moment of panic, he never noticed the hockey-coated hand that had made its way across their battlefield. His head turned with great force and Naruto knew he had perhaps broken the man's jaw. Doflamingo hit the edge of the room and dropped to the black floor. Despite the pain in his jaw, he couldn't stop himself from holding his throat and coughing, spitting out saliva in the process. Naruto walked up to the downed man and looked down with a smile on his face. He felt great. After all the trouble the bastard put him through to get him, it was worth seeing the man try to cling to life. The veins around his head becoming more visible as the blood rushed to his head. I've lowered your resistance to oxygen. You'll be dead in about a minute, Naruto told him. Doflamingo choked out as his hands began digging into the ground. Naruto frowned slightly, not understanding what the soon-to-be-dead man was saying. He crouched down. Wanna repeat that? They'll probably be your last words anyways, he taunted him. I got you. Naruto's eyes widened and quickly tried to jump back, but it was too late.
Doflamingo's right hand was pointing at his chest and 3 small white blasts shot out from his finger. Luckily for him, the Mon's poisoned brain messed with his aim slightly and only managed to hit him twice in the arm and once just under his right collarbone. The pirate dropped to a knee and brought a hand up to his collarbone. Damn. I deactivated my Kenbunshoku Haki thinking it was over. A bad mistake. I could have seen this coming minutes ago, he thought to himself angrily. The lines around the room began to disappear one by one until they were completely gone. Doflamingo saw this and used all his power to propel himself into the air and out of both the room and the gift bad's range. Immediately he took deep breaths of air while suspended in the air. Ha 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 ha, you almost had me there, Naruto-kun. I'll have to be more careful with you from now on. I'll commend you though, that's the closest someone has had me to death in a long time, he complimented. Naruto watched as he brought both his hands up and launched an attack. To his surprise, however, the strings never made it. Everything in front of him was pushed back with incredible force. The ground began to split rapidly, even splitting some of the buildings on the land. He turned his head back and saw the air around Whitebeard had been cracked. Looks like the old man is about to make his move, he thought before looking back to the sky only to find the Shichibukai gone. He grit his teeth in anger. He got away. Next time he'd be sure to just stab him in the neck when he had him on the ground. Whitebeard is going to go on the offensive. This is where we'll earn our alliance. I know a small wound like that isn't enough to keep you down. Let's move. Law ordered. Naruto stood up to full height and nodded. He rolled his right shoulder, making sure everything was still good. Yeah, let's go. With that, the two made their way closer to the scaffold. Following the attack from Whitebeard, all available pirates began charging forward, attacking without discrimination. What had helped remarkably was that one of Whitebeard's allies had gone straight through the ice with her ship, allowing even more pirates to try and get to the scaffold. On the other side of the battlefield, Fleet Admiral Sengoku looked down to see the carnage that was unfolding through narrowed eyes. He had anticipated the Yonko and his allies. What he hadn't counted on was the Surgeon of Death, and his first mate, the Death Dealer, being here. What was the connection between them and Fire Fist? Garp. He spoke, getting the Vice Admiral's attention. Those two are going to be a problem for us if they make it out of here alive, he said, referring to Naruto and Law. Garp followed the Mon's line of sight and his gaze fell upon the two members of the Heart Pirates. He watched as a light blue dome was created around the captain and first mate and the poor Marines that were unfortunate enough to be caught in it. Suffice to say, the Marines didn't stand a chance. He was both angry and mildly impressed as he watched the blonde thrust his blade at his own captain, only for said man to replace himself with an unsuspecting Marine. I agree. Trafalgar Law by himself is a brutal and intelligent fighter. That makes us dangerous, he began as he watched the man prove his point by rearranging the body parts of a couple Marines before throwing them into the water. Now add to that, we saw how close his first mate came to killing Doflamingo. That speaks volumes about his strength as well. If he hadn't let his guard down when Doflamingo was on the verge of death, we'd be looking for another Shichibukai soon. Not only that, but I know you saw his proficiency with Haki. He definitely deserves the bounty and notoriety he has. Sengoku continued. Back down below on the battlefield, the two Heart Pirates were standing back to back, blades drawn and covered in blood. Damn. There's no end to them. No matter how many we cut down, they just keep coming, Naruto complained to Law. His captain smirked in amusement. You're the one who wanted to be here, if I recall correctly. As he replied, he conjured up a quick room and muttered, "Talked." Immediately all Marines in the area floated into the air. Heads up, he told Naruto as he tossed them in his direction. He glanced up and quickly slashed multiple times, cutting the fodder into pieces. I know, but I didn't think there'd be this much fodder. It's getting annoying at this point. No matter how many we cut down, there's another to take its place, Naruto replied. For the first time in a good while, there was no Marine fodder around him. He took a couple deep breaths and took a look around. Whitebeard's division commanders were all duking it out with some of the vice admirals as well as more fodder. What he didn't see was a tall man in a ridiculous pink coat and sunglasses. Where the hell did Doflamingo go? He thought to himself. He clicked his teeth in anger. If I hadn't let my guard down, I'd have killed the bastard already. He was broken from his thoughts as one of the Marines was screaming in panic while pointing up. Everyone followed his line of sight and saw multiple black dots in the sky growing as the seconds passed.
Eventually the dots transformed into shapes. Were those people? His question was answered soon enough as the dots were close enough for him to make out. The most notable people he could distinguish were Emporio Ivankov, Sir Crocodile, Daz Bones, Buggy the Clown, and Straw Hat Luffy. Not only them but an entire ship with pirates in prisoner outfits were also falling from the sky. He remembered Law telling him before they came that Straw Hat had invaded Impel Down trying to save Ace. He actually made it out and brought them with him. Guy's crazy, he thought. Luckily for him he was far enough away that he didn't have to move out of the way as the ship crashed into the bay. Oila. Things are about to get a lot more interesting, he called out while looking at the ship. True enough, once everyone was off the ship they too began to attack the Marines. Though not all of them. Emporio Ivankov looked around and noticed that Crocodile was now missing. Buggy yelled and pointed behind them. Looking back he watched as the sand user charged at the world's strongest man from the back only to be stopped by Luffy. Crocodile must be stupid if he really believes he can take the old man, commented a wide-eyed Naruto. He knew even the admirals would have trouble fighting the old man in a one-on-one fight. Well, he's got confidence in his abilities, I'll give him that much, Law replied, shaking his head. While he too had a powerful devil fruit, he knew he'd be no match for Whitebeard. Naruto was going to reply with another quip, but a flash of pink in his peripherals caught his attention. He turned his head quickly and sure enough the man he was looking for was in sight. Doflamingo was sitting on a ledge where the Shichibukai had originally been standing. He and Kuma were the only ones still there. Naruto smirked as he noticed the Mon's smile didn't seem to cover his entire face as it had earlier. Every now and then he would also rub his jaw. There he is, he thought happily. He ignored what was happening with Whitebeard and Luffy and rushed towards Doflamingo intent on finishing the job. As he cut down the many fodder Marines, he overheard Sengoku reveal to everyone that Monkey D. Dragon was Luffy's father. Ducking a spiked mace from a Marine, he kicked the man in the ribs hard enough to hear the bones break. Dragon is his father? If he makes it out of here they're really going to be after his head, he thought. He wouldn't doubt it if the Mon's bounty went up because of it. He leaned back to avoid two blades coming at him before jumping over them, wanting to finish his battle with the Shichibukai. As he made his way forward he quickly stopped and jumped back a few feet to avoid being stomped by someone. Looking up he saw the large upper body and disproportionate lower body of a man with a long face who was stitched up from the chin down. Gecko Moria, Naruto announced. You're not the Shichibukai I'm trying to battle right now. Move, he ordered. Kishishishishi, you've been doing me a great service by getting me more corpses to add to my collection. However, I can't let you get any further. But don't worry, your corpse will be used well when I face that man again. Kishishishi, Moria told him with a wide grin and finished with a laugh. Almost salivating at the thought of adding Naruto's body to his collection. Moria, you have no chance of killing me here. The man grinned and raised his arms high in the air, letting the ground shake for a second. I've seen how your techniques work by watching you fight Doflamingo, he said as he jumped far back. Seconds later many of the dead Marines that had been killed in battle began to rise, all having a lifeless look in their eyes. No matter what you try to change their resistance to, it doesn't matter because they're already dead. Kishishizi. Kill him, he ordered. Naruto drew his blade and looked around him quickly. Law was busy fighting off a vice admiral while the rest were still trying to advance. Looks like I have to do more grunt work, Naruto muttered as he began slicing. He coated his blade in haki and ripped through the undead Marines as quickly as he could. He ducked a slash meant for his head and thrust it upwards, impaling his blade through the zombie's head. He kicked the Marine in the chest, releasing the blade from his head and turned around to parry another blade. Moria from his vantage point watched with gritted teeth as Naruto cut down his minions with ease and didn't look the least bit winded. Looking around he saw quite a bit of Marines and pirates alike battling. Letting a wide grin appear on his face, he used his devil fruit powers to steal the shadows of everyone nearby. Naruto cut the head off a Marine and turned in time to see Gecko Moria growing in size rapidly. He wasn't sure what the man planned to gain by doing this. Take a look, Death Dealer. This is the power of my devil fruit. The more shadows I steal, the more powerful I become. Kishishishi. He laughed maniacally. This is the end for you. Naruto's neck kept moving back as he was looking up higher and higher at the growing man. His face, however, remained unimpressed. You have size, and that is all, he commented, much to the Mon's anger. Moria pulled out a set of scissors before taking them apart, using the two pieces to act as two separate blades. He wasted no time in jumping forward and slashing downward with his right blade, intent on ending the fight quickly. Naruto stayed put and brought his own blade up in defense. When the two blades collided, Naruto's feet actually dug into the ice a few inches from the force of the attack. Not giving him time to counter, Moria used his second blade to try and swipe him down from the left. Seeing the attack coming, the blonde broke the deadlock in time to jump over the oncoming swipe. He followed up by jumping back and parrying the next 6 slashes that were sent his way. How they let someone so weak become a Shichibukai is a mystery to me. Naruto taunted as he blocked another attack from the giant pale man. "I'll show you how," Moria yelled in anger. "Doppelman," he called out. The shadows around them all converged to create makeshift spears. The giant man waved his hand in his direction, commanding the spears to attack. Naruto's eyes took a light blue hue once more, and immediately he began weaving around the spears. Occasionally he would use a hockey-coated slash to disassemble one, reverting it back to regular shadows. The spear attacks that missed hit the frozen ground with enough force to break through, creating a splash of water. Moria looked as if he was on the verge of popping a blood vessel with how angry he was getting. The blonde seemed to be one step ahead of him the whole time. Naruto saw Luffy fly by them quickly, his body having a slightly pink tint with smoke emitting from it. "I don't have time to play with you anymore, Moria," he said out loud. He coated his arms up to his elbows in haki and disappeared from his spot. Moria's began looking for his target when he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. His mouth opened in a silent scream, in doing so releasing the shadows that he had previously stolen. As the shadows were freed, his body also began to shrink back to its normal size. Moria dropped to his knees before collapsing face first into the ice, his body still releasing some of the shadows. Not wanting that to drag on, the blonde walked up to the downed man and stomped on his back 2 or 3 times to get the last of the shadows out. Finally he raised his arm outward towards the man. "Gift ball." The small black orb touched Moria before disappearing. "Your resistance to nitrogen has been lowered significantly," he told the man. Like Doflamingo earlier, he was on the ground convulsing, holding throat in a vain attempt to cling to life. The large disproportionate man was caught in a catch-22. The air he was trying to breathe was killing him slowly. "I'm not gonna make the same mistake with you that I made with Doflamingo," Naruto commented as he looked down at the man. It was over in the blink of an eye. A large part of the ice beneath them began to stain red as the blood of the man pooled beneath him. If one were to look closely, they'd see the expression of fear and panic had never disappeared from his face even after his head had been removed from his body. Sheathing his blade, Naruto looked at the severed head of the former Shichibukai and kicked it into the hole that had been made by the shadow spears earlier. Those nearby watched in varying degrees of shock as one of the Shichibukai was killed in such a brutal fashion. Unlike when Law used his rune to cut someone, Naruto didn't get the added benefit of blood not being drawn. The captain of the Heart Pirates smirked as he laid his sword on his shoulder. He shouldn't have gotten in his way. A little ways off, Emporio Ivankov blinked rapidly, taking in what he had just seen, and walked forward towards the blonde. Naruto noticed this and tensed slightly. He'd seen him helping Straw Hat, so he didn't draw the blade, but he was still on guard just in case. "Uzumaki boy, I'm Emporio Ivankov of the Revolutionary Army." He introduced himself formally. "Dragon could use someone like you," he added afterwards. Naruto stared at the transvestite for a second before he shook his head. "I'm flattered you think so, but I'm going to have to pass," he replied before turning away. He was going to chase after Doflamingo when another voice stopped him yet again. "Death Dealer." Turning around, he came face to face with the smoking sand user. "I had heard about you raking in bounties like crazy for a while now. So I was surprised when I heard you had joined up with the Heart Pirates led by Trafalgar Law." He took another 2 puffs of his cigar. "For my own curiosity, answer this. It's clear you're stronger than Law, so why take orders from him? Why not form your own crew instead? It wouldn't be too hard for someone like you to gather a large following," he asked. Ivankov, Buggy, Daz Bones, and some of the prisoners were all looking to him, waiting for his answer. "I have no interest in leading a pirate crew. There's certain responsibilities you have to uptake as a captain that I don't want to deal with. You have to be a counselor, a psychologist, a mentor, to name a few, because everyone in the crew depends on you. There's times where you'll put your own life on hold to make sure everyone in the crew is taken care of. I didn't want that burden. He sought me out and gave me an incentive to join. I can see my goals being achieved by operating under his banner, and in return I lend him and the crew my power to help them achieve theirs. He explained. While someone like Crocodile, who couldn't see himself serving anyone else, still found it stupid, Ivankov could see the reasoning in this. Well said. Law told him as he walked up next to him. Come on. We have to back up Straw Hat, he's taking too many hits. As the two men continued running through the battlefield, a couple large explosions from behind them got their attention. A big man with a giant battle axe stood alongside the perimeter of the bay with about 20 Kuma clones. The same ones that had been present at Saboti. The clones were all attacking the Allied ships with devastating power. This wasn't the only thing that had gotten their attention. Marco's voice rang out from the battlefield, turning everyone's attention. The Whitebeard. One of his own crew members had stabbed the old man straight through the chest. The impressive thing about this was that even though he had a blade straight through him, the man still stood tall. As it turned out, the man, Squar, had been tricked by Akainu into thinking that Whitebeard had made a deal with the Navy to kill all of them in exchange for Ace's life. Naruto saw the look on the Yonko's face as he charged up his devil fruit powers and released an attack so powerful, all of Marineford began to shake and some parts even began to crumble. Even after the attack died down, Fleet Admiral Sengoku still stood tall from his position on the scaffold. He noticed the man talk into a Den Mushi and all available Marines began to retreat. He frowned. Something wasn't right. He was proven correct as giant iron walls began rising from all around them. This is bad. They're going to try and trap us here. We can't even leave because the Kuma clones are in the way. Law told him, gritting his teeth. Naruto turned towards Whitebeard. Oi, old man. One of your attacks could really come in handy right now, before things get worse, he told him. Whitebeard looked at him briefly before looking forward. He noticed Or's body had stopped one of the walls from rising. With what he had underwater, it could be used to his advantage. Don't worry, was all the man had said. Naruto hoped he had something big up his sleeves because he noticed giant red lava fists falling from the sky. All around the bay, pieces of ice were melting at a rapid rate. The giant lava fists that the Admiral was raining down on them were coming down fast. At the rate it was going, Naruto didn't doubt that the entirety of the ice would be melted soon. He looked to his side and saw Law nod at him. Understanding the signal, the two moved as close to the iron walls as they could, as they seemed to be the least affected area. The two took deep breaths as the lava fists continued to rain down. Whitebeard said not to worry, but if something doesn't happen soon, we're screwed. Naruto commented. His point was soon being proven correct, as one of the three ships Whitebeard had brought with him were hit by one of the attacks. The Yonko pulled his fist back and struck the air, creating cracks in space. The ground shook, feeling the effect of the attack, but still, the force of the punch wasn't enough to break down the walls. The walls are reinforced well. Law commented, looking at the giant indent where Whitebeard's attack had struck. Whitebeard doesn't look too concerned though, even with all the ice melting. He must have a trick up his sleeve. As he finished his sentence, the two noticed bubbles appearing on the water next to the ship that had been struck. Soon more and more bubbles began appearing before a shape became visible from underwater. The shape began to grow in size the closer it got to the surface, and they noticed many of the Whitebeard pirates making their way through the still solid pieces of ice to get to it. It's another ship. Naruto deduced. This is his plan. Let's go. The two made their way to the ship along with everyone else. Soon enough the ship finally flew out of the water before settling on the surface of the bay. Within seconds a large majority of the pirates were atop the ship along with the captain. Naruto cut two pieces of ice from the ground before throwing it towards everyone. Law then used his room before using Shambles to switch places with the two pieces, so they were now atop the boat as well. Alright, we made it onto the ship, but now what? Law asked out loud. They were still trapped in the bay as long as the walls were up. Though it should be noted that the aerial attack had finally stopped. His question was answered not too long after, as even from atop the ship a shaking could be felt. Looking ahead, they noticed that the still body of Ors Jr. was moving slightly. At the very same moment the ship began to move towards him. When his body collapsed, it stopped one of the walls from rising. Law noted. Now Whitebeard most likely plans to use him for something. He was right. Ors faced the ship and kneeled slightly as if preparing to lift. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he realized what the old man was planning. Ors braced himself and grabbed the front of the ship before raising it into the air. Using his large muscles, he picked up as much of the ship as he could and dragged it into the opening in the wall. The Marines seemed to have known what was being planned as well, as they had begun shooting the giant with everything they had. Naruto was impressed with the man. He was already half dead as it was with a missing foot, and still managed to drag a giant ship into plaza and took shot after shot from cannons and bullets. Finally Oars dropped the ship and collapsed, taking down some Marines with him. Whitebeard has entered the plaza. A Marine yelled from somewhere in the crowd. The Marines stood looking at them in shock. They were sure that the walls plus the hellfire that Akainu had rained would have been enough to end it. So to see the strongest man in the world in front of them was a scary feeling. To their horror, they watched as the man took a few steps forward before jumping off the ship and finally stepping into the plaza. "Stay back, my sons," Whitebeard commanded as he stared down the sea of Marines in front of him. Naruto and Law watched in amazement as the man pulled his Basento back and charged it with the power of his devil fruit. A small white orb of translucent light appeared at the tip before coating the blade. "Ah!" the captain yelled as he swung. Similar to before, cracks appeared seemingly in midair. Only this time the cracks broke like glass before a giant shockwave erupted. Buildings were destroyed and Marines of different levels were blasted back by the attack. Some of the vice admirals were able to stay in place with some difficulty. The 3 admirals all stayed put, hands in their pockets as their subordinates were sent flying. Finally, one by one the division commanders jumped off the ship and landed in front of their father in a line, Naruto and Law following suit. "Guys, rescue Ace and destroy the Navy," Whitebeard ordered. At that declaration, the entirety of the Whitebeard pirates jumped off the ship, weapons drawn, and charged forward. Up above on the scaffold, Sengoku watched with narrowed eyes as their plan had backfired. The walls that had been used as a means for victory now looked like a disadvantage. "Garp, I don't think we're gonna make it through this unscathed," the fleet admiral commented as he rolled his sleeve up. Garp didn't answer but nodded, as he had come to the same conclusion long ago. Down below, the fighting had once again started up. It was looking grim for the Marines as they were being cut down left and right. Naruto and Law were back to back cutting everything that came their way down. Naruto created gift balls with nitrogen being the substance of choice and shot them at Law, while his captain would use his room and switch places with Marines to drop them at an incredible rate. This combined with their combined swordplay spelled trouble for the Marines. The 2 pirates cut the same Marine down before they once again felt a shockwave. They turned around to see Whitebeard's Basento stopped mid-attack by Akainu's lava-coated foot. The 2 briefly separated before attacking once more. Whitebeard had his fist coated in his power, while Akainu likewise had a giant lava arm at the ready. The 2 attacks clashed, creating a shockwave across the plaza. The 2 pirates were evenly matched, it seemed, as neither man was backing down from the deadlock. As much as he would have liked to watch them battle, Naruto didn't have that luxury, his haki telling him to duck right in time as a blade passed over his head. Turning around, he kicked the man in the chest before swiping his feet out from under him. He quickly unsheathed his blade and stabbed the Marine in the chest before putting it away. He didn't have time to take a breather as he sensed another attack coming. Right as he dodged to the side, a yellow beam went flying by him. He didn't need to look to see that the beam had come from Kizaru. He let out a relieved breath when he noticed that the man seemed to be aiming at him specifically. He was just attacking any pirate he saw. "Pops!" Marco had yelled out. Everyone stopped to see what had happened. Naruto was surprised to see that Akainu had his left fist buried in the mon's chest. Akainu even pushed in a bit before removing his fist, letting everyone see the burning hole left in Whitebeard's chest. It was the first time Naruto had seen the man actually be injured in the battle. Luckily for them, Akainu took a few steps back after the attack, most likely believing that he had done enough damage to put the man down for a while. This gave the commanders and allies time to come to the Mont's aid. This wasn't good. If Whitebeard went down, the entire war would be lost in an instant. "Marines, take Whitebeard's head," Sengoku yelled from the scaffold. At once all shocked Marines were broken from their trance and immediately began to try and jump Whitebeard. The allies and commanders were feeling the strain as fighting a sea of Marines at once was proving to be quite difficult, even for high-level pirates like them. "You think this is enough?" Whitebeard asked as he began to stand again. "I won't be beaten until I've saved my son. I am Whitebeard." Standing to full height, the man let off an earth-shattering attack, effectively shaking the Marines off of them. The morale was coming back quickly. The pirates all smiled in relief as their father wasn't dying just yet. "You're foolish," Sengoku said. Though he didn't yell it, it was still heard clearly. "Now watch what happens to your son. Do it," he ordered to the two guards who were at the ready to execute Ace. The two nodded and raised their blades high into the air before slashing down. Unfortunately for them, right as the blades were about to make contact, the two guards passed out due to the overwhelming feeling of Haoshoku haki. "He has it," Law muttered, looking at Luffy with slightly widened eyes. Naruto glanced at the rubber man briefly before turning his attention to the scaffold. They were close. If they played their cards right, they could pull off the rescue quickly. With a lot of the low-level Marines being knocked out, the Whitebeard pirates were able to gain a slight upper hand in the battle. Soon the plaza was filled with pirates and Marines once again clashing blades and fists. Naruto didn't fight anyone, instead trying to find a way to get to the scaffold. As if some divine deity was reading his mind, he noticed something. Luffy was running behind someone, Inazuma, if he had heard the name correctly earlier. The man was using some sort of scissors to cut the ground before he flicked his arms, forcing the ground to rise and land straight on the scaffold. "Law, look," Naruto called out. The tattooed man saw the path and where it led, but he also noticed who was waiting at the top. "It won't be that easy. Garp won't let Straw Hat through that easily," his captain replied. "That's where we come in. Let's go." The two traded places with some Marines closer to the path via Law's room and began running behind the young man. They ran while staying a few feet behind him in case anything happened they wouldn't all be taken out. The distinct sound of a cannon being fired was heard. Looking to the left, Law jumped up and cut the balls before they could impact the path. As they had expected, Vice Admiral Garp jumped down onto the path to meet them. Well, more specifically Luffy, but he also had to meet them by default. Naruto looked at the two about to clash but noticed Garp's mind didn't seem to be focused. A brief vision passed through his mind as the two neared one another. "Law, get ready. This is the moment we've been waiting for," Naruto told him. They watched as Garp threw a punch that seemed to have no real intent behind it. As expected, Luffy dodged the attack before retaliating with his own punch that knocked the Vice Admiral off the platform. Finally, the trio made it to the scaffold where Fleet Admiral Sengoku was watching them. The man stood by as Luffy spoke to Ace while the two heart pirates kept their eyes on him. Naruto glanced at Luffy, seeing him pull out a key ready to save his brother, only to have that key be destroyed courtesy of Admiral Kizaru. "No!" Luffy yelled as the key was split into two. "Room!" Law yelled, creating the light blue dome around them. It was at this moment that Sengoku finally seemed to take action. Though he would soon find out it was too late. The man began to glow a golden color while rapidly growing in size. "Shambles!" cried Law, switching Ace and Sengoku's positions. Sengoku found himself where Ace had been kneeling. Though he was lucky he was already big, as if he hadn't he'd be confined to the seastone cuffs. "Move out," Law told them. They didn't need to be told twice and immediately jumped off the platform. They moved just in time to avoid being crushed by Sengoku's giant fist. The four pirates landed down below in between more Marines. The four men stood back to back, making sure all sides were covered. "Thank you guys for helping my brother and saving me," Ace spoke. "Are you guys friends of Luffy?" "Not exactly," Law answered, unsheathing his blade. "We can discuss this once we're in the clear, though." Of course. The Marines tried their best to try and stop them but were no match for their combined power. The four men quickly carved a path through the soldiers and began making their way towards the Whitebeard pirates. Seeing this, the pirates all doubled their efforts to fight and began trying to clear a path for Ace and the others to follow. "We're almost home free," Naruto commented as he slashed the chest of another Marine. "Just a little further." As the quartet was getting closer to the rest of the pirates, they stopped in place as another large explosion was heard. They turned back to see Whitebeard still standing tall, but panting heavily, his chest bloodied and his breathing ragged. "My sons, I'm about to deliver my final order as your captain," he shouted, much to the dismay of his crew. "Survive at any cost and make it back to the New World safely," he continued before cocking his arm back. "I'm a remnant from the old times. There's no ship that can bear me in the new era." He punched the space in front of him, destroying everything leading up to the Navy headquarters. "Now go," he yelled. The Mons crew hesitated but complied nonetheless. The commanders ordered everyone to get to the ships and head back to the New World. though they too had tears in their eyes. Naruto was forced to bring his blade up to block the sword strike of a vice admiral. He didn't have time to counter as he had to jump back to slightly as to not get shot from the Marines who had their sights on him. Deciding that wasting his time with the vice admirals was counterproductive, he shot off multiple gift balls in every direction, using them as a distraction to jump over the Marines and continue running. At this point he was no longer fighting back against the Marines. His only goal was to get Ace to one of the ships with the Whitebeard pirates and head back to the Polar Tang with Law. He punched an unlucky Marine that happened to be in his way before he heard Akainu speaking up from behind them. He and Law noticed Ace had stopped running and was now facing the Admiral, a look of pure loathing on his face. Akainu was going off about how Whitebeard was a coward and couldn't do anything or beat Roger, all the while Ace was letting his anger get the best of him. His body beginning to burn the longer the man kept talking. "Idiot. All this work will have been for nothing if you die here," Naruto thought as he tilted his head, letting a stray bullet fly past him. He took off towards Ace the moment he saw the two begin to clash. Ace's fist clashed with Akainu's, and though they looked evenly matched, it was becoming clear Ace was losing. Magma was on a higher level in the hierarchy after all. The closer he got to them, he finally noticed that Straw Hat Luffy was on the ground, awake but clearly having trouble moving. It seemed all the fighting and damage he'd taken had finally caught up with him. What was more troubling was that he wasn't the only one to notice this. As Ace hit the floor, having lost the exchange with Akainu, said Admiral turned his attention to the Mon's younger brother. Oh shit. Naruto thought, knowing what the man was planning. Law wasn't close enough to use his room ability on them as he was busy with 3 vice admirals, all who were rushing him in such a way as to not give him any space to counter. He watched as the Marine of Absolute Justice aimed a lava-coated punch towards the young Straw Hat. Having caught his second wind, Ace jumped up and threw himself protectively in front of his younger brother. Naruto watched it happen almost in slow motion as the fist neared the former prisoner. If the punch connected, it would be over. Using every bit of strength he had, he pushed off the ground with enough force to shatter the ground beneath him. Within a second, an explosion that let off smoke and debris was detonated. Everyone, both Marine and pirate, watched with held breaths as the smoke cleared out. When most of it was cleared, Ace was still standing with a fist touching his back. Most shocking of all was Naruto, whose body was coated in haki, was holding on to the giant fist, stopping it from moving forward. Though he had managed to stop the fist in time from penetrating the back of Ace, said man still fell over as enough had connected to do some serious damage. Death Dealer. The gruff voice of Akainu sounded out. The man was looking right at him, his fist still suspended in place. A once respectable name among the Marines, considering all of the pirates you would capture for us. Now reduced to a low-life pirate. He finished before batting the blonde away. Naruto managed to flip in the air and land straight up, opposite the Marine Admiral. Since you got in the way, I'll be taking your head as well in the name of justice. Akainu told him as his body began taking the properties of lava once more. The blonde took a deep breath as he prepared himself for arguably the most difficult fight in his life until this point. His arm was beginning to pulse in pain from where Doflamingo had shot him earlier, and his stamina was low from all the fighting and running. I know I'm not on Akainu's level yet, but I'm not about to die here, he thought. He could feel his heart beating faster and his blood flowing in response to the upcoming battle. Letting a smile appear on his face, the two fighters disappeared from their spots before reappearing closer together, a magma fist meeting a black hockey fist. Naruto felt his feet digging into the ground from the amount of force Akainu had behind his attack. He grit his teeth in anger, trying to push back, but ultimately failed as he felt his opponent add more pressure. He hit the ground hard enough to leave a small crater around him. His instincts flared up, telling him to move as danger was approaching. The young man pushed himself off the ground, rolling aside just in time for another magma fist to land where he had previously been. He got up just as the sound of footsteps began getting closer. Coating his arms once more, he met the man halfway and began his own assault. The two traded punches and kicks briefly. Fists met fists and kicks met mirrored kicks. Even with his precognition abilities granted to him by his haki, he was barely able to keep up. His body ached and his stamina was low. The fact that the man had more experience than him was also a disadvantage to him. His fist collided with magma again and he could feel himself struggling to stand upright. Damn. His punches are heavy. If I didn't have haki, I doubt I'd be alive right now, he thought as he continued mirroring the Mon's attacks. The blonde realized he wasn't getting anywhere and created space between them. Grabbing the hilt of his blade, he covered the blade with haki but also extends it all the way to his shoulders. Seeing the change of tactics, Akainu likewise let lava cover his arms and began shooting lava fists, the same way he had earlier though on a smaller scale. His haki made it easy to avoid being hit by the attacks and wasted no time dashing forward. Once close enough, he began trying to cut the man down. The man wasn't an admiral for nothing, however, as he was able to dodge and weave every slash with little to no problem. The blonde knew he was outclassed. "I'm not going to underestimate you like Kizaru did at Sabaody," Akainu tells him as his arms glow a dark red color. "Inagami Gurren," he called out as he punched forward. The lava transformed into the shape of a dog and charged at him. "It's too big to jump out of the way," Naruto thought as it got closer. He closed his eyes and gripped the blade with both arms before taking a deep breath. A brief flash was seen before the magma-created dog was split down the middle, crashing into the iron walls around them. His little victory was short-lived as Akainu had disappeared from in front of him. Naruto's eyes widened as a brief vision flashed through his mind. He quickly turned around and crossed his haki-covered arms across chest in an X formation. His precognition had once again saved his life as a second later a magma fist connected with him. A small golden blur seen flying across the battlefield into the ship that Oars had carried into the plaza. "Naruto!" Law yelled as he watched his vice-captain get hit. He grit his teeth in anger as more high-level Marines kept him from helping. The Whitebeard pirates that had picked up Ace and Luffy also noticed that Akainu was heading their way again. The commanders all had their weapons drawn, making subtle motions to have the rest move the two incapacitated pirates away. "Where do you think you're going?" Akainu questioned. "None of you are leaving this place alive," he added as lava began leaking from under his cap. The Whitebeard pirates who were still able held their weapons at the ready, fully prepared to lay down their lives for their brother. "Oh!" A tired voice came from behind them. They turned around to see Naruto on shaky legs walking back towards them. Even though he had his arms coated in haki, he had burn marks on his arms. The only part that seemed decent was the part that had been covered by the other arm. Just below his collarbones was also marked red, though not as dark as his arm, which had taken most of the blow. "We're not done here," Naruto added. "Oi, take Ace and Luffy to law, we'll treat them," he added. "You're resilient, but you'll die all the same," Akainu taunted as he made his way back to the blonde. The commanders wasted no time in continuing along, taking Ace and Luffy with them. Naruto dashed forward at a speed that caught the admiral by surprise. The man still managed to bring his arms up in time to block a kick aimed at his head. The blonde didn't let up, however, as the moment he landed he tried a hard punch to the chest that was also blocked. "Gift ball," he said, created multiple orbs and shooting them toward the admiral. "That technique is useless. I've seen how it works. As long as it doesn't touch me, it does you no good," Akainu told him before letting off magma fists again. The blonde managed to weave through them, if only barely. He could feel his body becoming heavier as the fight dragged on. "It's not working. He knows how to get around my techniques since he knows they're coming," he thinks before he stops. "That's it." He jumped in time to miss being hit by another magma fist. Landing, he released the haki he had coating his blade before getting into position. Rushing forward, he slashed at the man, creating the black blade yet again. Though there was something different about it this time. Rather than solid black, it seemed to have a slowly moving pattern up and down the blade. "Pathetic," Akainu taunted as the fist met the blade. The blonde smirked as he felt the power behind the punch immediately disappear. Using this small moment of surprise, he parried the arm aside. The blade once again losing its black color before regaining it, though this time it was solid black. Naruto slashed at the man from the hip up to the shoulder and smirked in satisfaction when he saw the blood spill out of the man. Seeing that he had the upper hand, he cocked his arm back before punching the admiral in the face with everything he had. Even the normally composed Kizaru had his eyes widened in surprise as his fellow admiral flew out of the plaza and into the bay. "Let's move, now's our chance," Naruto yelled. Everyone ran in the direction of the bays, looking to steal one of the Marines' ships. Unlike when he dropped Doflamingo, he kept his Kenbunshoku haki activated. He knew that little attack wouldn't be enough to keep Akainu down. Sure enough, the man was up by the time the pirates all made it back to the bays. Though it was to be noted he was no longer using his devil fruit powers. He must have realized that on the ice he was standing on using his magma powers would be to his disadvantage. "You should be honored that a rookie like you could do this much damage to me," Akainu told him before looking down at his cut chest and feeling his face. "But this is as far as you go. There's enough ice to run to the ships. Beppo should be close by with the polar tang too. There's not enough space for a large-scale battle here. I need to finish it," he thought. Naruto jumped at the man blade at the ready once more. Akainu was ready and had his arms lit up, though they didn't seem to be emitting as much heat as they previously had. The man moved at speeds faster than he had throughout their battle, and Naruto was finding it difficult to retaliate. He managed to block a punch with his blade but still felt the force behind it, threatening to knock the blade out of his hands. Akainu brought down his other fist and Naruto knew he wouldn't be able to completely block this one. He willed his haki to extend all the way to his face right on time as the fist connected. Luckily it wasn't as bad as the last one he had eaten. The blonde felt himself hit the ground hard and could see pirates looking to him in worry. Among them was his captain, who was making his way over to him as fast as he could. His mind was hazy, and his body unresponsive. His stamina almost completely gone, and the punches he'd taken from Akainu really took their toll on him. "Time to die," he heard. Using all the leftover strength he reached out and gripped the leg of the admiral and created a black pool beneath their feet. "Look where we are," Naruto told him, spitting out some blood. "This little bit of ice is the only real ground we have besides the pieces keeping the ships in place." He took a deep breath. "You're in my gift bad, and the substance I chose is oxygen. I've lowered your body's resistance to almost non-existent. In a few seconds your body will begin to shut down. If you use your magma powers you'll melt the ice beneath us," he explained, spitting out more blood and fighting to keep his eyes open. "It's already weak from the heat you were radiating just now. We'll both fall into the ocean and meet our deaths. Either way you lose." He finished with a small smile, enjoying the angry look Akainu was sending him for forcing him into this situation. "Oh fuck," he thought as he could feel his gift bad begin to shrink in size as his eyesight began to turn black. Akainu could have taken the opportunity to end it then and there but couldn't, as he felt an ominous presence behind him. He had just enough time to turn around and see Whitebeard in all his bloody glory behind him with a punch coming right at him. If his body wasn't weak from the effects of the technique the blonde had used, he probably could have defended himself. Naruto stayed conscious enough to watch the admiral get sent flying into the iron wall with enough force to actually dent it. The strongest man in the world waddled over to the downed admiral almost as if he could die any second. By now most of the pirates were on Navy ships and Law was standing aboard the polar tang, which was making its way to his spot on the ice. He felt himself be lifted up and moved, most likely by Law, and managed to watch Akainu make another hole in Whitebeard. Even in his half-conscious state he could still see Whitebeard pick the man up before throwing him into the air, chest on fire and all, and use the last of his strength to punch the man in the side of the body. Hard enough that the earth began shaking once more and Marineford began to crumble even more. As the final bit of energy left the Yonko, those still up heard the sounds of evil laughter in the distance. The laugh and Law telling him that Beppo was waiting for them with Luffy and Ace was the last thing he heard before darkness finally took him. The following day the hypnotic sounds of soft beeps was the first thing the blonde pirate woke up to. He moved his eyes around slowly, taking in his surroundings, and as his vision cleared he noticed the familiar walls. The medical bay of the polar tang. He thought to himself as he let out a breath. He closed his eyes again and thought back to where he had been before he had blacked out. Marineford to save Fire Fist Ace. His eyes opened and turned his head to his left. Sure enough, the former 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates was laying down on a bed similar to his. The man had IV tubes connected to his arms and bandages wrapped around most of his upper body. Most likely having been treated by Law for the burns he received from Akainu. Turning his head to the other side parallel to him, Straw Hat Luffy was also out cold. Like his brother, he too had been bandaged, though his were for all the hits he had taken as opposed to fire damage. Bringing his attention back to the ceiling of the medical bay, the blonde tried to push himself up only to feel pain in his arms and chest. He took deep breaths as his head hit the pillow once again. Waiting a few minutes, he took in a deep breath before pushing himself upright, disregarding the discomfort he felt in doing so. He turned, letting his legs hang off the bed, and took a good look at himself. He noticed that just like the other two, his chest had been bandaged up. After Akainu shot that dog attack at me, he managed to punch me with his magma fist. I took most of the attack with my arms, but some got my chest too. He thought. He brought his hands up to his face and saw that they too had been wrapped up. He tried flexing his fingers, but that caused spikes of pain to shoot through his body. Apart from that, he had a medium-sized bandage on the side of his face from where he had been punched by the same man. Being careful not to make noise as to not wake up the other two patients, he headed to the door and walked out. Naruto walked down the corridors of the Polar Tang until he arrived at the stair set that would lead up to the main cabin of the ship. Luckily for him, the door was already ajar, so he only had to use a little bit of force to open it. The crew stopped whatever they were doing to see who it was. Once they realized it was their crewmate, they resumed their activities. "I wasn't expecting you to be up yet," Law commented from one of chairs. "How do you feel?" Naruto took a seat next to Beppo and swiped some of the chips he was eating, ignoring the glare the bear threw at him. "I've been better. My arms, chest, and face hurt. My hands do too, but to a lesser degree than everything else," he replied. "That's to be expected. You've got second-degree burns on your arms and part of your chest from that punch you tried to block from Akainu," the surgeon explained. "Your hands got burnt slightly from when you stopped him from impaling Ace, though for all your injuries your haki managed to decrease the damage. They should be healed in about 2 to 3 weeks. Chances are they'll be scarred though," he finished. Naruto nodded and accepted a plate of food from one of the crewmates who had been cooking. All the fighting had built up quite an appetite and he dug into the meat he was provided. "So what happened after I passed out?" he asked in between bites. "I saw Whitebeard beating Akainu's ass, then a laugh." Law went on to explain how Blackbeard had appeared on the scene at the end of the war with some of the most dangerous prisoners from Impel Down as part of his crew. He somehow found a way to steal Whitebeard's devil fruit powers, making him the first person to have 2 devil fruit powers at the same time. Shortly after that he fought the Marines before everything was stopped by red-haired Shanks. "I don't know much after that since we had to get out of there quickly," he explained. "Damn. So much for an alliance with Whitebeard." He took another bite. "Now the world is down, one of the Yonko and the Whitebeard pirates are most likely disbanded," Naruto added after. "So where are we right now?" he asked. "We're on our way to Amazon Lily at the moment," Law replied, taking note of Naruto's raised eyebrow. "Boa Hancock followed us after leaving Marineford and told us we could take Straw Hat there. Seeing as he wouldn't be safe anywhere else, it was our best bet," he explained. "How's that going to work? I thought Amazon Lily didn't allow men to enter," the blonde asked. "We're not sure. She just told us we could take him there," Beppo replied as he moved his plate away from Naruto, who was trying to swipe more chips. Sometime later at Amazon Lily, the crew had made it to the Kuja pirates' home and immediately had a problem. While Boa Hancock was okay with them staying on the island, the previous empress voiced her concerns that men weren't allowed no matter who they were. Straw Hat Luffy was the only exception. In the end, it was decided that the crew would spend their time on the outskirts of the island and would be supplied food by the warriors. While most of the crew were drooling over the Amazons who were currently serving them food, Naruto and Law were sitting off to the side watching the crew make fools of themselves around the women. Naruto too was admiring a certain short-haired woman, Ran, if he heard correctly. As she passed by with another woman carrying more food, his eyes subconsciously trailed down her backside. As she disappeared behind the makeshift barrier they had created to stop the men from entering the village, he turned to meet the amused, grinning face of his captain, who had caught him staring. Rather than try and make up an excuse about how he wasn't staring, he matched the grin and chuckled slightly. "If you tell me you didn't think she was hot, I'm going to question your orientation," Naruto jabbed. "No, I agree with you," he replied, "only I'm more discreet with my gaze." Naruto laughed for a second before his face turned serious. "Law," he called out. Seeing he had his attention, he brought up what had been on his mind since he had woken up. "We need to get stronger. We also need more crew members. As it stands, our chances of surviving in the new world as we are very slim." "I'm aware," the surgeon answered as he looked to his crew eating and laughing. "I've been thinking the same thing for a while now. Originally the plan was to head to the new world as soon as possible, but that's changed." Naruto nodded at his captain, prompting him to continue. "I've heard something that made me change the original plan." The blonde sat up straighter, having a feeling that some big news was coming. "What exactly have you heard?" While you were securing our alliance with Jewelry Bonnie, I met up with an informant who told me about the situation with Fire Fist Ace. That wasn't everything though. I found out exactly what Doflamingo is supplying to Kaido. He revealed. You know who Vegapunk is. The scientist with the Marines? Yeah, what about him? The blonde answered. 2 years ago there was a massive explosion that wiped out all life on an island in the New World called Punk Hazard. It was said that the explosion was caused due to a failed experiment by Vegapunk. I got word that Caesar Clown, his former colleague, is on the island creating smiles. Artificial devil fruits that he supplies to Doflamingo, who then supplies them to Kaido. With this in mind, I have a plan. We're going to have to go to Punk Hazard, but to get there with no issues I'm going to have to join the Shichibukai. Once done, we'll head to the island and stop Caesar from producing the fruits. The moment he's out of the equation, Doflamingo won't have product to supply. He explained, hoping his vice captain would catch on. Naruto's face broke out into a grin as he did indeed catch on, and without product Kaido will be upset. Even though we'll be on his shit list, he's sure to kill Doflamingo for his failure, as he doesn't seem like the most reasonable guy out there. Exactly. But it's not gonna be easy. We do need to get stronger, he said before stopping as he noticed his navigator heading their way. Captain. Ace is waking up. Straw Hat Luffy shouldn't be much longer either, he reported. Thank you, he said as he stood up and headed into the sub. Naruto chose to stay put as he figured they'd be coming back out anyway. In the meantime, he'd admire the view. Inside, Sub Law walked into the medical bay and sure enough Ace was sitting up on the bed, checking his surroundings. Where are we? The Mera no Mi user asked. Law doesn't answer immediately as he checks over the man's readings on the machines before doing the same to Luffy, who still hadn't woken up. I don't have any spare clothing for you unfortunately, but your shoes are over here. He motioned next to the machine. Meet us outside and we'll talk, he ordered before heading back outside. A few minutes later, Law and Naruto were joined by both brothers, the younger of the two having woken up not long after Law had left the room. Their presence was noticed by the Amazonians, who immediately went to inform their empress that Luffy had awoken. The two brothers took a seat across from their rescuers and for a few seconds it was quiet. Everyone waiting to see who would speak first. The silence was broken by Ace. First, let me thank you for not only helping me but saving Luffy as well. If you guys don't mind, could you let us know what's happened? Law recounted the events following them going down. From Whitebeard's death to Blackbeard stealing the Mon's powers and Shanks appearing at the very end before they made it out. Apart from that, we don't know much else. We had to get you two out of there quickly to be treated quickly, he explained. They gave the man a couple minutes to take in the fact that his former captain and father was dead. Ace shed tears for a few minutes before the sadness was replaced by something else. Anger. Teach, no, Blackbeard is responsible for all of this, he seethed, parts of his body igniting in response to his anger. I hope you don't plan on going after him again, Naruto said, getting his attention. Seeing the look in Ace's eyes, he elaborated. You tried that once and look where it got you. You need to plan carefully, otherwise next time you'll be in an even worse situation. It may have sounded harsh, but it was the truth and the man needed to hear it. Seeing that the atmosphere in the area had gone down, Law took over. So what do you plan to do now? Ace took a minute to think before answering. I'm going to look for my crewmates. Marco, Jozu, Vista, all of them. We'll figure it out from there. You can sail with us for a while. No doubt the Marines will still be looking for you since you managed to get away, Luffy told him, having been oddly quiet the whole time. That could be a good idea for now, Ace replied, having mulled it over before turning back to Law and Naruto. As for you guys, you two risked your lives for me and for that I owe you one. Should you ever need my help, just let me know, he declared with the utmost seriousness. Law reached into his pocket and tossed something to the former spade pirate. A Den Mushi? The man asked. One of the reasons we were at Marineford was to try and secure an alliance with Whitebeard, but the plan obviously changed, the captain replied. You two were a big part of the rescue. Luffy spoke. Kizaru destroyed the key I had to free Ace. Without you using your power, I don't know how I'd have gotten him out of there, he added before he also took on a serious look. If you're willing, the Straw Hat Pirates are willing to form an alliance with the Hard Pirates. Law and Naruto smirked. At least one thing came together. Securing an alliance with you was also a goal. he replied before throwing a snail at him as well. Naruto frowned and blinked multiple times as Law continued talking with Luffy. How many snails do you carry around in your pocket? He asked but was ignored. His question only elicited a chuckle from Ace, who had heard the blonde ask the question. Soon the conversation stopped as Boa Hancock appeared and threw herself onto Luffy, asking if he was okay, much to Ace's amusement and Naruto's silent envy. Out at sea, the word of Whitebeard's death had spread around the world quickly. The rise of Blackbeard and his crew was a hot topic among pirates and civilians alike. However, among a select few there was also another topic of importance being discussed. Eustace, Captain Kidd and his first mate Killer were seated at a table on the main deck of his ship, surrounded by his crew as they looked over a newspaper. So Whitebeard is dead and Blackbeard stole his power. Not to mention Trafalgar Law and that damned death dealer made bigger names for themselves. He said angrily before slamming a knife onto the table, "We're falling behind." "What do you want to do?" Killer asked. "We're gonna head to the New World. With one of the Yonko down, the balance of power has shifted and I don't know what's going to happen. What I do know is that the Heart Pirates are going to become big players soon. I can feel it. Set sail to the New World," he yelled, getting a chorus of "yeah" from his crewmates. XXXXXXXXX on another ship out at sea, an older man in a well-tailored black suit was standing at the edge of his own ship. His subordinates dressed in a similar manner standing behind him waiting for him to speak. "It won't be long before the sea is swept into chaos. Pirates will soon be spilling blood over Whitebeard's territories," he said before taking a drag of his cigar. "Blackbeard will most likely try and capitalize on it, and when he does, chances are he'll be joining the Yonko ranks. His actions at Marineford prove he'll be a threat in the future." One of the rookies was there as well. "Father," one of his men commented, handing him a newspaper. "Capone, gang." Beeg took another puff of his cigar before taking the paper. He notices a picture of Trafalgar Law jumping off the scaffold with Ace. Another picture below it showing Naruto just after he had kicked the severed head of Gecko Mariah into the ocean. Those two will be a problem in the future as well. Trafalgar Law doesn't do things for no reason. He doesn't do things out of the goodness of his heart. He's planning something, he commented before focusing on Naruto's image. And his second in command, to kill a Shichibukai and come within seconds of killing Doflamingo. He's made quite the statement. Individually they're strong, but together, if not dealt with quickly, well, let's just say your chances of survival are slim to none, Capone commented. "What should we do, father?" one of his men asked. "Let's have our meal and then prepare to head to the New World," he ordered. Captain Drake, are you okay?" a man asked. Drake was standing on the main deck of his ship looking out towards the ocean as his men looked over the news that was the hottest topic in the world at the moment. He closed his eyes. Things at the Navy HQ will never be the same. His crew looked slightly confused by this. "What do you mean, Captain?" While Whitebeard did die, they failed to execute Ace, which can be seen as a loss on their part. Not only that, but Blackbeard has shaken things up now that he's revealed to the world that he has two devil fruits under his control. "The Navy will have to respond," he explained. Making sure everyone was paying attention, he continued. "Also, Trafalgar Law and the Death Dealer have shown their power. Their teamwork was overlooked in favor of the Whitebeard in a Kainu battle, but if you paid attention you'd see they cut through everyone that got within feet of them. They've made themselves bigger targets for the Marines," he finished. XXXON another ship somewhere on the ocean, a double-elbowed man had a hand on his chin as he contemplated the current state of affairs. "What's going on now?" he asked out loud. "What do you mean?" asked a pirate. "I'm talking about Trafalgar Law. Straw Hat Luffy and Ace are both future enemies. Law doesn't do things just because. He's got some ulterior motive for helping the two. Whatever he's planning, it can't be good. We should kill him now before he gets too powerful," one of the men yelled out. Some of the pirates nodded, having the same thought process. "It'll be almost impossible right now. He has both Ace and Straw Hat plus the Death Dealer. Trying to take them on now would be suicide," Apu replied. "Yeah, don't you remember? There was originally 18 more rookies with bounties over 100 million berry, and one guy killed them all and happened to join up with Law," another man told them. Apu stayed silent as he listened to his men talk amongst themselves. "We need to get stronger fast. Everyone seems to forget Law's devil fruit power makes him almost invincible. Aside from that, the Death Dealer has fought against two admirals now and came out alive both times. Things will have to change in the New World." XXX. Another ship in the ocean had another crew discussing the same thing. A large winged man was listening as his fallen monk pirates discussed the recent changes in the world. The key to all of this will be Blackbeard, he pitched in. He has a strong crew plus the abilities of Whitebeard. There's no doubt about it, his crew will be the center of this storm for some time yet. So what's our plan going to be, Captain? One of the men asks. We're going to need to gain strength and allies. Law is beating us all to it, saving Straw Hat and Ace for whatever scheme he's up to and adding a big name like the Death Dealer to his crew. He's moving and we have to do the same. Captain Hawkins, what's wrong? A man in a dark robe asked as his captain hadn't looked away from his cards.
No matter how many times I go through the cards, Straw Hat, Luffy and Ace's chances of survival never reach zero. He replied. His crew sweat dropped as that's apparently all he was concerned with. One guy was going to ask how their chances of survival was looking but ultimately held his tongue. He didn't want to get killed after all. Back with Naruto and Law, the group had finally set off again. Ace and Luffy had stayed behind as Rayleigh arrived at Amazon Lily, having swam there of all ways possible. Most of the crew was inside, leaving them two to talk.
So where to now? Naruto asked, leaning on one of the rails on the edge. No doubt everyone is heading to the new world by now, but we're gonna wait a little. We're gonna focus on getting into the Shichibukai, Law replied. You never did say how you planned on doing that. Law smirked. My method is one you should be familiar with. After all, you used to make a living off of it before I found you. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. Bounty hunting. Yeah, just a little different. We're not gonna kill them. We're just going to take their hearts and hand them over to the Marines. 100 or so should be just about enough. Law revealed. So where should we start? Naruto asked. Just know, unless we get some big name pirate, I'm not gonna be at 100% since my hands are kind of burned. I know. It shouldn't be too stressful, but we'll start back at Sabaody. There's always a good supply of pirates there. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.